Very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, it's Manifesto Day for the Conservatives. Is this the last big chance for Rishi Sunak to save his campaign?
Well, in just a few minutes, we'll ask the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride.
First, remembering Michael Mosley, will speak to a close friend of the TV doctor about how he transformed so many people's lives.
It's Tuesday, the 11th of June. Rishi Sunak is expected to put another cut to national insurance at the heart of the Conservative manifesto.
Good morning, Kay. I'm at the Silverstone racetrack where the Conservatives are launching their manifesto later, hoping it will help them in their victory in this election race.
We're back on the campaign trail with the Lib Dems. They're hoping to sell their own manifesto to voters here in their former heartlands in the southwest.
Also ahead, booze bans, travel restrictions and riot police. Germany gets ready for England at the Euros. The last moments of TV doctor Michael Mosley. A coroner says he died after stopping to lie down in searing heat. Apple unveils its plans to put artificial intelligence into the iPhone and the pockets of over 1 billion people.
There's a ghost in my house. I can't hide from the ghost of your love that's inside.
And the loneliness of fame. Billie Eilish speaks out about the shock of being ghosted. Our top story, the Conservatives are expected to promise tax cuts and more help for first-time buyers when they publish their manifesto this morning. Rishi Sunak will seek to present himself as the heir to Margaret Thatcher in what could be his last big chance to rescue his party's campaign. Our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey, is with the Conservatives this morning. They'll be launching their manifesto a little bit later on, about 11:30 or thereabouts. Darren, morning.
Yeah, good morning, Kay. As you say, 11:30 here at the Silverstone racetrack. I will try and keep the puns to a minimum about racing to victory and about the very fact that they're way behind in the polls. But frankly, the Conservative Party do need a game changer to a degree today, because this campaign's not gone terribly well thus far, and so they are hoping that today does help them turn a corner, does help them in the final 3 weeks of this campaign. What are we expecting to hear, as you say, quite significant tax cuts to a degree. The Prime Minister alluding to the fact that he is going to chop another 2p off the national insurance rate. That would effectively halve the rate, actually, over the last year or so, and this is part of the Conservatives' long-time ambition about getting rid of national insurance altogether. Though when it comes to tax, it must be said that the Conservative Party are still going to commit themselves to the threshold increases when it comes to income tax. That still means that millions of people are going to pay, ultimately, more tax throughout the next Parliament, something Labour Party committed to too. As you say, some help for, we believe, first-time homeowners, that they're going to get rid of stamp duty altogether for properties costing up to £425,000. Lots of the other announcements, we've also heard an awful lot over the last couple of weeks, whether it's on that national service announcement, whether it's on extra police officers, whether it's on help for pensioners when it comes to protecting them against income tax. There have been lots of suggestions in the last 24 hours or so, though, Kay, that many within the Conservative Party want Rishi Sunak to go further when it comes to taxation, or potentially when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights around migration and Rwanda. We'll have to wait and see whether he's prepared to do that later. The fear, of course, is if he goes too far, it could either split the party or it could undermine the public's credibility when it comes to the Conservative Party. But as I say, be in no doubt, this is a very significant moment for the Conservative Party. They really do need the narrative to change today. They need people to listen, and they need people to like the announcements that are going to come, as you say, just before midday.
Would you say, will they be able to stay on track? We'll have to wait and see. 11:30 today. I know, I couldn't resist. Our political correspondent Matthew Thompson is in Torquay with the Lib Dems today. Any more stunts planned today, perhaps?
I'm not sure I'm at liberty to say, Kay, but I am aware that something is happening later on, and given that we are by the beautiful coast, I'm told it may involve water, so watch this space. I've got my swimmers just in case. But we are here the day after the Liberal Democrats' own manifesto, and they'll be hoping to sell that to voters, particularly parts of the country like this, which were once upon a time Liberal Democrat heartlands. And their manifesto yesterday, it was filled with, I suppose, what you might call retail-friendly friendly policies, particularly on care, for example, free personal care for the elderly and the disabled, a big package of £9 billion for the NHS, policies on sewage and various other things that the Lib Dems think play well for them. But broadly speaking, Kay, I think it's fair to say that the Liberal Democrats' manifesto is being treated as a cautious document. I mean, uncharitably, you might even say a slightly unambitious document. And why do I say that? Well, look, our own Ed Conway yesterday showed that it's about, in terms of the spending commitments, about half as big as the manifesto in 2019, for example. The Nuffield Trust, a big health think tank, they looked at the £9 billion health and social care pledge the Lib Dems made, and they've said it's not even really enough money to simply freeze the NHS budget as it is until 28-29, so it's not a particularly generous package. And there may be a reason for that. Allow me to offer one potential explanation. The Liberal Democrats, particularly places like this, are trying to capture a big swing in anti-Tory voting. You don't do that if you pepper your manifesto with ambitious and divisive policies. So it's a slightly safety-first approach in the hope that they can just hoover up some of that anti-Tory sentiment.
At least the sun's shining, Matthew. Thank heavens for small mercies.
Indeed.
Thank you. We'll bring the Conservative manifesto launch live to you here on Sky News at 11:30 this morning from Silverstone. Then tomorrow morning, I'll be in Cleethorpes for a special programme ahead of the Sky News leaders' event, The Battle for Number 10. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer will be grilled by our political editor, Beth Rigby, and face a live studio audience here on Sky News tomorrow from 7. Now, booze ban, travel restrictions and riot police, it can only mean one thing. They're just some of the measures being prepared by German police ahead of the European Championships, with England's opening match against Serbia designated as one of the most high-risk fixtures. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports.
In the German city of Gelsenkirchen, the spectators are also the spectacle. Police carefully watch over the crowd at this potentially volatile clash. At the gates, fans are randomly checked for weapons and booze. Inside, officers are on alert for troublemakers, honing in on a group of masked ultras gathering in the stands. This is where England will play their first game of the Euros against Serbia. It's been classed as high risk, so police are using this league match as a test run.
I think it's a very high-risk game because of the history, because of the hooligans both sides have. Like Serbia, they have many hools. The English guys with many alcohol, they are sometimes very aggressive. So it's a great job to do this, to prepare that, so that hopefully nothing will happen.
This is what they want to avoid. More than 1,500 people were arrested during the riots at the 2016 Euros in France. For high-risk matches here, they'll serve lower alcohol beer in the stadium and fans can't drink in the stands.
Young people coming for the first tournament, etc.
British police are sharing intel and thousands of hooligans have been banned from travelling.
Over 2,000 troublemakers away from football has made it a much safer place. And when you play that out over the last 10 years, 10 years, behaviour of football fans has been far, far better.
From fan violence to terror attacks, police and security services across Germany are training for a range of threats. Mobilising extra officers and security experts and increasing checks at stations and borders.
Policing the Euros is a complex challenge because it's not just about keeping the fans safe in the 10 stadiums where the games are being played. There are also the 12 million fans in the fan zones to look after.
In Thuringham, where England has its base camp, police have also been doing drills. They say the tense global situation makes security more complex. But Germany's determined it's ready and can protect the millions of football fans coming here. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
You were just saying you don't get it.
If you're a massive fan of the game and then you go, or you purport to be a massive fan of the game, and then you go and smash places up, The two do not compute. That maths does not work for me.
No, I completely agree with you. But I suppose there's a psychology behind why they do it, but let's not go into it at this time on a Tuesday morning.
No, we'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
Talking about psychology, let's talk about the psychology of politics in the US, because there's so much about kind of politics and also two very high-profile trials, what that might mean. And sideshows, what that might mean for the upcoming general election, shall we? Well, this time it's focused on Hunter Biden's gun trial, and the deliberations there have begun for the jurors following the trial of the president's son. It's the first of two cases he's expected to face during his father's re-election campaign. Hunter has pleaded not guilty to all three charges. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has the details.
Well, after just over a week of evidence here in Wilmington, the jury now has the case against the president's son with them. A verdict could come at any time now. The central allegation against Hunter Biden is that he lied on a form to obtain a gun, claiming that he was not in the midst of a drug addiction when in fact he was. The prosecution has revealed pages and pages of text messages from around the time when the gun was bought, which detail conversations with drug dealers and with the widow of his late brother Beau, a woman with whom he had a relationship. There have been photos too of Hunter surrounded by drug paraphernalia. It has been an extraordinary case, lifting the lid on the tragedy, the struggles, the web of relationships within one family, the first family. It's a case that is profoundly personal for the Bidens, for the president, but of course it's deeply political as well. Now, if found guilty, in principle, of all the three counts, Hunter Biden could face 10 years in prison.
A three-stage ceasefire proposal calling for a full and immediate end to fighting between Israel and Hamas has been approved by the UN Security Council. The deal includes the release of all hostages, withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza and the reconstruction of the Strip. The US, who drafted the resolution, says Israel accepts the plans. Meanwhile, Hamas says it welcomed the vote. Singapore Airlines is offering compensation to passengers who were on board the flight that suffered extreme turbulence. One person was killed, several others seriously injured on board the plane travelling from London to Singapore. The airline offering $10,000 to passengers with minor injuries and $25,000 to those who sustained serious injuries and require long-term medical care. Meanwhile, an Austrian Airlines pilot has been called a hero after successfully landing a plane despite severe damage. The flight from Mallorca to Vienna unintentionally flew into a thunderstorm, unbeknownst to the crew. Heavy hailstones shattered the windscreen and ripped off the nose of the plane. All 173 passengers and 6 crew on board landed safely.
What?
Those pictures are incredible. It's testament to the engineering of aircraft that can still fly and fly safely, and also the skill of the crew.
But what? I mean, flipping egg.
There's some tough hailstones, that much is for sure.
Does that make you
Paul's
anxious?
speechless.
I got a bit of hail in my garden yesterday afternoon, but it wasn't on that scale, thankfully.
I'm a nervous flyer, so yeah.
But
Whenever I
also
see
now.
stuff like that. So we had 2 stories together.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much.
No worries.
See ya. Thanks a lot. Paul's here to talk about wages.
Yes, we've had the latest labour market data from the Office of National Statistics. So the data from the real world of the economy is flowing in while we're in this virtual world, we might call it, the election campaign. Gives a bit of an idea what the economy's doing. Wages have been rising at 6%. They've been rebounding, as we know. That's flat month on month, but the interesting number is the underlying, when you adjust that for inflation, real-term wage growth is 3.2%. That's the highest for nearly 4 years. Why does that matter? Well, that's good news, notionally, because we're getting more money in real terms in our pockets, but it will affect what the Bank of England thinks about doing.
OK.
With interest rate cuts. You'll recall when this election was called, there was a question about Rishi Sunak wanting to see interest rates coming down, thinking they might not. This makes it less likely, most think, that the bank will cut interest rates next time round. Because if we have more money, if wages are rising at 3.2%, even though inflation is now close to 2%, that means there's more money in the economy, might make them nervous about raising it. There's some other numbers around as well. Unemployment has ticked up slightly. There are still nearly 1 million vacancies in the economy, Kay, jobs not filled. But there's also been an increase in the number of people who aren't working at all. More than 22% of people, more than 9 million people. Big rise since COVID in people who've just dropped out of the workplace. It's one of the things holding back the economy. I've been in Middlesbrough, spent some time looking at the issues, and we put a report together which I think we can look at now.
Oh, it's a bit smoky in here.
Yes.
I need to stop smoking so much in here. I do.
Michael is unemployed and lives alone. He's just enough space for his hobbies.
Keeps you busy, you know what I mean? It's something to do. Between that, teaching myself a bit of Latin and whatever else, it just keeps me out of mischief.
But after 6 years out of work, he's stuck in a rut and says he wants a job.
People must think like, oh, it's all right to be on the dole and not have to do anything, but it's boring. You know your money and when it's going to run out.
Michael's first steps back towards the workplace have brought him to the council-led employment hub in Middlesbrough, a front line in a workforce crisis driven by long-term sickness and mental health.
Economically inactive for the last 4 weeks, and there's no chance of you going back to work in the next 2 weeks, is that right?
That's holding the economy back and pushing the welfare bill up.
They get used to that pot of money that's coming in, and it's very difficult with the cost of living crisis at the moment. Sometimes it is a bit of a vicious circle that they want to work full time, but ultimately they'll be worse off with the benefits being taken off them.
It makes it feel like work doesn't pay.
You could say that, yeah, but it's that sense of achievement at the end of the week.
The balance between welfare and work is policed by job centres. If you're unemployed, you have to attend a weekly appointment, but those signed off sick don't have to look for work, a system that can be open to abuse.
We hear people talking about mental health and almost as if it's the new bad back, you know, it's an excuse. People get signed off and it's a way of playing the system. Would you recognise that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm saying yes, definitely. We have to be able to, you know, question, you know, and ask, because not only is it our job to support the public, we've also got to protect the public purse.
The solution to the workforce crisis is often said to be to get tough, to make the benefits regime less generous, sick notes harder to come by. But the evidence here in Middlesbrough is it is not as simple as that. The impact of poverty and ill health means many people need an enormous amount of support before they can even think about getting a job.
Fantastic. Michael says he wants to work, but he knows his ambition is fragile.
I feel like I want to get back into work or something, and if I maybe don't do that, especially if like only yourself to talk to, sometimes you can like, you go backwards, you lose the confidence.
For the next government, rebuilding the economy means repairing the workforce. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Middlesbrough.
Guess who's on for the government today? Mel Stride, Work and Pensions Secretary. You're on more often than I am. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm at Silverstone, so I'm at the starting grid, all revved up and ready to go. Good morning.
Well, you're going to launch your manifesto later on. What are you offering that's going to change anything?
Yeah. So there's a very clear choice, I think, Kay, this week. You're going to see two very different manifestos. Ours that we're launching today, at its heart, is going to be cutting people's tax and making sure that they have a secure financial future. With Labour later on, I think you're going to see questions around tax rises, particularly because of this £38.5 billion spending black hole that they have in the offer that they're putting forward.
Now, they've already told you many times that that is not the case. It's a barefaced lie, they say.
Well, no, not at all. I don't know if you saw the Prime Minister on Panorama's interview last night. He set out very clearly where those figures come from. There are 27 different spending commitments. 21 of them have been costed by the Treasury. 2 of them actually are Labour's own figures, including the largest figure of all, this so-called green prosperity plan that they have, which is costed at £23 billion. There's no getting away from the fact that there is this £38.5 billion black hole. Now, what that's going to mean is more tax. So already Labour have said that they will not follow our triple lock plus, which will keep pensioners out of income tax. So you're going to see millions of pensioners being dragged into income tax under any future Labour government. There's a piece on the front page of the FT this morning, actually, speculating about increases in capital gains tax and the very detrimental impact that will have on investment in our country and the ability for our country to grow, which is what Labour talk a good story on, but the reality is their tax policies, I'm afraid, are just not going to work in that respect. So there is a very clear dividing line between us.
So a 2p cut in national insurance contributions. What else?
So, well, you're going to have to wait to see the full manifesto
I thought I had
a little
you
bit
then.
later, but we... sorry, say again?
I said I thought I had you then. I thought you were going to say that it was in the manifesto.
You know, if I did that for anybody, it would be for you. But I'm afraid I'm not going to divulge all the details of the manifesto before it's officially announced. But look, this is going to be a really exciting moment. We are the party. If you think about this election campaign, OK, so you've got Labour, who don't want to say anything. They want to keep a small profile. They want to carry that Ming vase across the polished floor. They want to hold on to that lead and drift across the line. We are the party that is out there with the bold, clear plan for our country. And that's why we've already come forward with measures to protect our pensioners from tax, whereas Labour are going to tax them. It's why we've come forward with measures for first-time house buyers, for example, property buyers, to make sure that we support them getting into the property market. It's why we've announced 100,000 additional apprenticeships, and there's going to be a lot more, particularly around lower taxes in the manifesto that we're going to be announcing later this morning.
OK, however, whatever you're announcing, Bloomberg Business has been reporting a survey of traders, portfolio managers, economists, retail investors that says the best election outcome for the pound would be a Labour win.
Well, I very much dispute that because I think what would definitely happen if Labour win this general election, and we've still got plenty of time till the general election actually occurs. If they win, I think it's going to be very, very bad for the economy. It's going to be very difficult for a lot of people in terms of their personal finances because taxes are going to go up. And you mentioned the pound. Well, the pound really tracks the confidence that there is in the UK economy. And as I say, on the front page of the Financial Times this morning, there's a lot of disquiet being voiced across business about potential capital gains tax increases. Now, the implication of that is it's a tax on investments, it's a tax on gains made on shares and investments, on property, and so on. And this is going to have a very, very negative impact on the UK economy if Labour get into power. So I really don't accept that it's going to be good for the pound.
OK, so traders, portfolio managers, economists, retail investors don't know what they're talking about.
Well, as I say, I disagree entirely with that, and I would say, you know, read the front page of the Financial Times this morning, and what a number of leading business people and people that know about investment in the UK economy have to say about what I'm afraid we strongly suspect with Labour. They haven't ruled out increases to capital gains tax. They haven't ruled out increases to tax for millions of pensioners, and millions of pensioners paying tax on their state pension for the first time ever. They have not ruled that out. And I think we've got to brace ourselves for those things if we are going to have a Labour victory at the polls. But look, there's time to go. We are putting out a very bold, clear plan that is going to help people in their daily lives. Look at what we've already done. 29 million people benefiting from 1/3 reduction in national insurance.
Okay.
That's worth £900 to an average earner. These are things that really matter in people's lives.
9 million people not in work and not looking for work. What are you going to do about that?
So we are doing all sorts of different important welfare reforms to encourage more people into work. We have lower levels of economic inactivity at the moment than the average across the EU, the G7 and the OECD. We have a lower level of economic inactivity, which is what you're describing, than every single year under the last Labour government. So we have a good, strong track record of getting people into work. Look at unemployment at the moment. It's almost half what it was under the last Labour government. Every single Labour government in history has seen unemployment higher at the end of their term of office than it was at the start. We are a job-creating machine in this country. 800 new jobs created under this government every single day of the week. The Labour Party couldn't be more. We talk about young people.
We have to get people
Youth
to accept
unemployment
those
under
jobs,
Labour
and they're
went up
not.
over 40%. Under this government, it's come down.
But they're not
over
accepting
40%.
the jobs, Mr.
I'm sorry.
Stride.
So-
And there's a massive ballooning in the number of long-term sick since the pandemic. How are you going to get people back into work? The jobs might be there, but you have to get them to
So
accept
on the
job.
long-term sickness and long-term sickness and disability front, you are right. Those numbers have expanded, and we have done a huge amount to start to seriously address that. One of the things that I've done is to make reforms to what's called the work capability assessment, which is the gateway onto those benefits. And the Office of Budget Responsibility, not me, but the OBR, has confirmed that that will mean 424,000 fewer people on those benefits as a direct consequence of the reforms that I'm bringing in. That's almost 500,000 people. We are really moving the dial here. But I come back to the fundamental point. Just look at the history. Labour destroy jobs, we create them, and all the evidence is there to show that.
OK, let me talk to you about a story that's on, you're talking about the front pages, on many of the front pages today. How can a 12-year-old boy buy a machete and with his 12-year-old mate bludgeon a young man to death in 21st century Conservative-led Britain? How can that happen?
It's just a terrible, terrible tragedy, and my heart goes out, obviously, to that young person's family and their friends. Just an awful, awful situation. The answer to your question is we have to get tougher on knife crime in a couple of ways, actually. One way is in terms of the policing of our streets and the powers that the police have to intervene where they have a suspicion that somebody may be carrying a knife. And we also have to stiffen up, and these are exactly the things we're doing, incidentally, the penalties around doing that kind of thing. One of the areas where, of course, we've seen knife crime rise the most has been in London, which is Sadiq Khan, who is responsible for policing that. But more generally across the police and more generally across crime, we are seeing substantial reductions. And in fact, across crime more generally, we've seen an over 50% reduction in crime, if you exclude computer-based crime and fraud, since 2010. And this is another reason why you'll be hearing something in the manifesto about policing, and it's why that we have completed our previous commitment to recruiting 20,000 more officers who can be out on the beat and making sure that we drive crime down still further than we have already.
Rishi Sunak has finally spoken to the media again, saying that he didn't consider resigning as Prime Minister after his gaffe, let's call it, on the Normandy beaches. Should he have considered his position?
Well, I think he did exactly what he should do, which was he very quickly recognised that he had made a mistake. He apologised unequivocally and very publicly for that mistake. But look, Rishi Sunak is somebody I know reasonably well. He will have felt this very deeply personally because he is a deeply patriotic person. And now he did, and that's why obviously he did attend the events in Portsmouth. He met veterans, many veterans actually in Normandy at all the British events.
You mustn't try and defend
but he
it,
recognises that he made a mistake. Sorry?
You mustn't try and defend what he did.
I'm not saying he didn't make a mistake. I'm accepting that entirely. Indeed, the Prime Minister is. And I think what he's now saying is that he hopes that people have it in their heart to forgive him. So I don't think anybody's saying that what happened was anything other than a mistake, and that mistake has been accepted and a full apology has been provided. But I'm making a broader point. You know, like our commitment, for example, to defence, we're 2.5% by 2030 is very strong. Our commitment
We should
to
just leave it
veterans,
as him having apologised, and we should
are evidence
accept his
of his
apology.
commitment.
Yeah. Just before I let you go, have you had your haircut specially for the manifesto launch?
Have I had my hair cut especially for the manifesto? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've got a bit of noise here. No, I haven't actually. So I don't know what that is. Does it look like I've had a haircut?
Yeah, it does actually.
Suit me,
That's why I was asking.
Question. Does it? Oh, okay. OK. All right. Well, emboldened by that, I will sally forth to my next media engagements. But thank you for that.
Elegantly put. Good to see you. Thank you.
And you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. I'm sure he has. Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we'll speak to a friend of Michael Mosley about how the TV doctor transformed people's lives. And how tech giant Apple could soon be bringing AI to your fingertips.
There's a ghost in my house. I can't hide from the ghost of your love that's inside.
And even the world's biggest stars aren't immune to being ghosted. We'll tell you about what singer Billie Eilish has been saying.
Westminster may seem a long way from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward to you and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
Westminster may seem far from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer, live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. The gang are here. Mel Stride trying to body me up this morning. Didn't work.
Yeah. It was interesting, wasn't it, in terms of the fact that, he was trying his best to say very, very little ahead of the Conservative Party Manifesto launch. He wants to kind of build up the tension for that. And essentially all he said was cutting tax is going to be at the heart of the manifesto. Now, we are expecting a cut to national insurance in this manifesto, and we've also seen other announcements. This morning, the Prime Minister's announced that he wants to cut capital gains tax for landlords who sell their properties to their tenants to try and boost a way of tenants being able to get on the housing ladder, for instance, moving from renting to buying. But interestingly, you know, he's tried to say that actually raising capital gains tax would damage the economy, and he was trying to say that Labour haven't ruled that out, and therefore we've got to watch that. It was really interesting because we've had a bit of a flip-flop from the Labour Party on this. Yesterday, we had Bridget Phillipson on the programme, and you asked her about these taxes. She said no, 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 no to all of them.
She did.
Jonathan Ashworth, in a press conference later on the same day, wouldn't rule them out. So there's a little bit of ambiguity on what Labour is ruling out or what they're still leaving on the table. And I think that's what the Conservatives are hoping to try and almost kind of grab a hold of and try and use that and weaponise that, which I think is what Mel Stride was trying to point to, and the fact that there was an ambiguity around capital gains.
And Labour's manifesto is out on Thursday?
Thursday, yes, exactly. So not long to wait.
And what did you make of him defending Rishi Sunak again?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky one because every time it's brought up in an interview, you can see inside their eyes, they die a little inside. They're
He shifted on his feet, did you notice?
Yeah, they just don't want to talk about it anymore. They're just hoping that it will go away and we can all just kind of move on, which is partly why they want to try and build up all this tension for the manifesto. But it's a really uncomfortable question to ask, and I think the question that many cabinet ministers refuse to answer is, would you have done the same? Because we know they wouldn't have done the same, we know, but they don't want to say that, they don't want to try and show their boss up, and he was clearly quite uncomfortable, and then you kind of pulled him up on that and said, you know, I don't think it's a good idea to try and start defending him when the Prime Minister said how sorry he is and how much of a mistake it was. Penny Mordaunt last week saying it was a really big mistake and it was really and utterly wrong, so, you know.
And our Sam yesterday, sitting here, and saying that he didn't think that Rishi Sunak, when he interviewed him, was sorry.
Exactly.
And Rishi Sunak has, dare I say, come across quite robotic in these apologies, and there is an opportunity, I think, for people like Mel Stride, if they want to continue in politics, to come across as more human, because it's an intrinsically very human story that the Prime Minister has dealt with not very deftly. And at the end of the day, everything points to the fact that Rishi Sunak won't be the Prime Minister and also the Conservatives won't be in power. If you want to, on a personal level, continue in politics as a Conservative politician, why not just say it as
Because
it
you have
is?
to toe the party line, don't you, until the very last moment, and then run for the tape.
It was a really good interview last night on Sky News. Tom Parmenter did a package, and it was just somebody in an allotment, and he was just asking him about the D-Day commemorations, and the person just said, it's really bad judgment. Anyone and their dog would have known to stay there. And I think that just summed it up, was actually like the instinct was missing, and I think that's what might
I'm going to look at that, actually, in a few minutes' time, so you can judge for yourself what you made of that. But, you know, just apologise, just say, I need your forgiveness. You know, you need to be human if you're a politician, not robotic, as you said. Enough pontificating.
Let's remind you of the top stories.
Yes.
Rishi Sunak, of course, trying to channel the Tory heavyweights, Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson, in pitching the Conservatives as the party of, I quote, sound money, when he launches the party's election manifesto a little later, expected to pledge tax cuts and help for first-time buyers. Germany is ramping up security ahead of the start of the European Championship this week. Police and security forces across the country training for a range of scenarios, from hooligans to terrorism and cyber attacks. Meanwhile, foul play has been ruled out in the death of Michael Mosley, as CCTV footage appears to show him falling over close to where his body was found. Greek police have told Sky News there were no injuries on the TV doctor's body that could have caused his death. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet with Israeli officials today before arriving in Jordan for ceasefire talks. The United Nations Security Council yesterday voted to support a deal aimed at ending the fighting between Israel and Hamas.
Hearing there about Antony Blinken meeting with the Israeli Defence Minister, former, after the United Nations Security Council approved a resolution calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Dalia Scheindlin is an Israeli political analyst based in Tel Aviv and is joining us now. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. What do you expect, hope, may come as a result of the meetings today?
Whether we expect hope or not is hardly the question. The fact is that there's very little sense that there is a serious chance of reaching this ceasefire deal, hostage release deal that the U.S. has proposed purportedly in the name of Netanyahu. But I have to say that it looks inauspicious. Know what? You can never say never. There's always a possibility, and it could be that in a few days or weeks we'll be surprised. But right now, I think the Israeli government is very much trying to downplay the expectations. Of course, the hardliners in Mr. Netanyahu's government are viewing the hostage release ceasefire plan that Mr. Blinken is trying to promote as a complete capitulation. Meanwhile, Hamas also looks at it as insufficient because it doesn't, in their perspective, include a permanent enough ceasefire, or at least it would have to be negotiated over time. And so, in very ironic and tragic ways, it seems like the only people who are really truly committed to reaching this deal would be the U.S. administration, the people, the families of the hostages, and the people, regular civilians in Israel, and of course Gazans, and the UN Security Council. But the governments and the leadership of both sides does not seem to be very committed to reaching this deal right now. I have to qualify it. We could always see a breakthrough, but right now the hopes are low.
When I refer to a former War Cabinet Minister, referring to Benny Gantz, of course, he's left his post. Antony Blinken will be taking some time to meet with him today. What fruit do you expect, or could that potentially offer?
Well, we don't know what it offers. I mean, Benny Gantz, as you point out, has left the War Cabinet. His party has left the coalition. That means also former Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot. And right now, it's unclear what this means in terms of political stability in Israel. I will remind viewers that the original Israeli pre-war coalition had a firm majority of 64 seats out of 120. And so Benny Gantz was an addition after the war began. His departure does not actually mean Israel is going to elections, despite, I know, a lot of attention to this. So I think that, the U.S. administration is certainly trying to keep its good relations with all sides of the political map. But it's not clear even if Israel does go into elections soon, the soonest they could be is months from now. And so many things could happen between now and then. We can't even really tell if Benny Gantz will be, the top opposition or competitor to Netanyahu, even though that's how he's been seen this whole time. So there's a great deal of uncertainty with regards to, in general, decision-making in Israel is a very murky concept right now. We don't know if there will be, if some of the hardline ministers in Netanyahu's original government will now go into the War Cabinet instead of Benny Gantz. Maybe yes, maybe no. They have demanded it. The very, very far nationalist extremists, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. We don't know if Netanyahu will give in to that. We don't know if his decision-making will be influenced more by the far right now. So certainly the U.S. administration wants to keep all the lines of communication open. But I think that, the Israeli public is also highly aware of the problems with the management of this war. The majority no longer believe in the total victory concept. And, that's why I think, the government is under some pressure. But Netanyahu, being a master of non-decision, seems to be continuing in that direction, even with relation to the composition of his war cabinet.
Mr. Gantz has been calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to put forward a clear day-after plan for the conflict in Gaza. Are the people of Israel any clearer as to what that might be?
No, the people of Israel are certainly not clear on it. And in fact, it's not their responsibility. It's the responsibility of the leadership to present that plan, to offer a vision. Of course, Israel should never have the say over what happens to the fate of Palestinians. Palestinians need their own national self-determination. But that's part of the problem. The Israeli government does not want to talk about a day after plan because that would lead to the bigger question of the days after the day after. However, there is a self-fulfilling cycle here that Netanyahu won't end the war until Hamas is destroyed, but Hamas can only be destroyed if there is something to replace it. And so it is certainly a self-fulfilling, a self-perpetuating approach to this war, which is why so many of the hardliners in the Israeli government insist on saying the war can't end right now. And Netanyahu has steadfastly refused to talk about who that, alternate power would be. Although I think that, interestingly, from many sides, not only from the Israeli government, but from international actors, from researchers, academics, and even Palestinian intellectuals, there is a convergence around the idea of some sort of multilateral international force, hopefully transitioning to Palestinian self-determination. But the Israeli public really is, I think, is just reeling from both trauma, of course, happiness from the hostage release and the pain of even 4 soldiers who were killed just in the last few hours. I think the Israeli public should not be expected to make policy plans absent any, a functional leadership that can provide a vision, at least for Israel, and hopefully in partnership, eventually reaching Palestinian self-determination. This government will never do it, but the Israeli leadership will have to get there eventually. It's just a matter of how many more people die.
Okay. Thank you. Back home, politics here, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer facing questions from our political editor Beth Rigby when they join Sky News in Grimsby tomorrow. The leaders will also have a chance to answer questions directly from members of the public. Our national correspondent has been speaking to people at the Peaksfield allotments in Grimsby to find out what they want to hear.
We all need to escape sometimes, to find the space to think. The Peaksfield allotments offer just that. It's an antidote to the circus of an election, with the Prime Minister trying to regain ground after that apology for leaving the D-Day commemorations early.
If you had to guess who comes out on top?
Ooh, I don't know. I think Starmer will, because of the D-Day thing, because that's still raw.
He's asked for forgiveness about...
Well, of course you would. Of course you would, yeah. But it didn't matter. Every man and his dog could have made that decision and got it right.
His opponent, Sir Keir Starmer, do you find a credible alternative there?
No, no. Nothing he said at the moment I've found to be, oh, that's good, radical, that's good. That should do it.
Across the allotments, in a polytunnel, we found a Women's Institute coffee morning. They told us what they're looking for in the next Prime Minister.
I like honesty, which is not always. I like honourable people that put their hands up when they've done wrong.
It's not just what they say, is it? It's what happens after, whether they keep their promise.
Sunak and Starmer can say what they want on the stage. They can argue and bicker, but these women want action.
They talk about levelling up, and you look at Grimsby and think, I don't think so. There hasn't been a lot of levelling up for Grimsby.
What do you really look out for, particularly around those debates between the leaders?
How they support the National Health Service, because it's one of the best really in the world. Also, I need to know about, the low-income people, how they get supported.
They liken it to running a successful plot here. The planning, the collaborating, and the determination to get results. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Grimsby.
Debate tomorrow with Beth. Don't forget, it's going to be a corker. Meantime, what's happening with Apple? Morning.
Good morning. Well, Apple is introducing artificial intelligence into their iPhones, which they say will make it an easier and more personable experience for people using their phones. And it will essentially improve Siri. I don't know if you use Siri, the voice assistant, and it will also be able to generate text and images. And it's after rivals like Google and Microsoft started doing the same thing. I don't know how tech savvy you are, Kay.
I'm not. Let's start with I'm not.
Nor am I.
Yeah.
So we'll go from the beginning.
Yeah.
So essentially AI is machine learning. It basically allows the phone to learn as if it was a human and solve problems like a human. You may have heard of ChatGPT.
Yes.
That's going to be incorporated. I used it to plan a holiday. You can put in inputs like your flight times or what you want to go and see, and it will come out with an itinerary.
Oh, that's clever.
So that's an example of what it will do. But not everyone is happy. Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and X, has said that he has concerns about privacy and data use, but Apple has very much stressed that data will be secure. So this is very much the future of where our phones are going to be going, Kay.
Goodness, I better put it over there. I'm doing my job before I know it. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Remember the life and legacy of Michael Mosley, joined by his friend and fellow author, Tim Spector. I particularly like the story about you having to convince David Bowie to take part in the Glastonbury Festival. You'd sort of set that up.
Yeah, that was funny. David wasn't that keen on doing big festivals at that time, and he was doing his own sort of quiet shows, enjoying life, just got married to Iman, everything was fine. And Glastonbury weren't super keen on him. They were worried he was going to do something very obscure, left field, like Tin Machine or whatever. And the promoter, John Giddings, said to me, look, let's get him to do it. And so I leaked a story to the Sunday Times. And my idea was that it had been one of the columns there. Wouldn't it be a great idea if Bowie played Glastonbury? Unbeknown to me, it ended up on the front page. Bowie headlines Glastonbury. Newspapers went, you know, the phones went crazy. They sold out all the tickets in a couple of hours. Glastonbury had a complete meltdown. And then the phone went quiet for 3 days, and I never heard a word from David. And I thought, oh my God, he must be furious. You know, he didn't want to play a festival, and he's booked in the biggest festival in the world. And after about 3 days, I got this message. Julian, who worked with me, it said, "You naughty boys, don't ever do that again." But it was great, David said. And of course, it turned out to be the biggest one ever. I think the walls came down. They had 120,000 people, and it went down in legend. And it changed the sort of trajectory of David's career. I loved working with the Spice Girls. They were so much fun and hilarious and great individuals, all of them. When I first got hired by them, my feet didn't touch the ground for a few days. I was flown out to Rome, and in fact, this is the thing, I had to go down. They were doing a little show there, and I got a call from my lawyer at the time, a guy called Alexis. He said, "I've just seen you. Why are you going down the Via Garibaldi in Rome?" I said, "Well, how do you know I'm there?" He said, "I'm watching Sky News, and they're actually plotting your course on the way from the airport to the hotel." And at that point, I realised how big the news was. The next day, we flew to Paris in a private jet to go shopping, as you do. Then we went to a disco in Madrid or something. And I remember then I finally sat down with the girls. And I remember talking to Victoria, and she was so funny. And I remember thinking, you've been misnamed. Forget Posh Spice, you're Witty Spice. And at that point, in all seriousness, I thought, they're such smart individuals. Let's bring out the media and the newspapers, and everyone can handle this individually. You don't need to be protected as a group. And so it came to be.
Hello again, everyone. We're remembering Michael Mosley this morning following his death at the age of just 57. Joining us is Michael's friend, Tim Spector, and fellow author, of course. Hi, Tim. Good to see you. Terrible, terrible news at the weekend. How will you remember him?
Well, fondly, of course. I think as a friend, he was very generous with his time and help. And he was one of those people that was just always curious, and his brain was always whirring in the background. He was always thinking of, the next project, the next thing. And he was always quizzing me about science and medicine. He had a sort of insatiable appetite to learn more. But I think what I liked most about him, and I think really what, perhaps his legacy, is the fact that he always thought positively. He wasn't one to complain or whinge about, events that had happened, bad luck, or the state of the health service. His message, which he took personally, but also he gave to the public, was a very positive one. It was, you can do stuff yourself. You can do, whether it's just one thing or there's always some little thing you can do to improve your life or that of your family. And you should never stop trying to improve, and don't wait for others to do it. This is something that is in your power to do. And I think that positivity really shone through pretty much everything he did, with this incredible enthusiasm, and also, the way he managed to convey that to others. But of course, he was a team with his wife, Claire. They complemented each other extremely well, and that's probably why they were and he was so successful in doing everything he did, which has gone a long way from medical school to journalism to being a TV producer, presenter, author, columnist, you name it, he'd sort of done it. So a bit of a polymath as well. So he was a super interesting guy to chat to. He just knew about everything, and so it was never boring being with him. And he would always take risks on everything as well. So he was never worried about himself. He just wanted to experience the world at its fullest.
What motivated him, do you think? Was it, I read about his father's ill health. Was that what motivated him?
Hard to know, really. I mean, I just think he was sort of born with a curiosity, and he would get bored of things quite easily as well. So that's probably why he changed careers so much. Why he stopped medicine early, and then he went to the BBC. Then he also went to the City as well briefly. Tried that, didn't find it. So I think he had a fairly short attention span and an endless curiosity to do things. And I don't think he had his childhood was rather distant. He was brought up really in boarding schools, really, rather than a very close family. That might have driven him. I don't think he really knew himself if he was asked that question. It just sort of happened. But he was a complex guy, and also people don't realise he was actually quite shy, and it took a while to get to know him. He was very extrovert on screen and did all kinds of wild things, but actually, in a crowd, he was actually quite a shy private man.
Yeah, very modest as well, is what I've been reading. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time to share your memories and recollections of a man that touched so many of our lives. What a shock it was to hear that he had lost his life in such tragic circumstances. Thanks for taking the time, Tim. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Kay.
Thank you. All today's top stories coming up for you in just a few moments here on Sky News, including we're taking you to Silverstone for a spin round the track. Why? Stay tuned and find out. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, it's Manifesto Day for the Conservatives. Is this the last big chance for Rishi Sunak to save his campaign?
Despite Kay's best efforts, Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride was tight-lipped this morning, but we'll be speaking to Labour shortly.
Better luck this hour.
Yeah.
Plus royal pep talk. Prince Louis advised...
Louise?
Louise, it says Louise there.
I know, but it
That's
doesn't mean you
completely
have to
thrown me. Right, scroll it back again.
OK, Prince Louis.
Plus royal pep talk.
Yeah.
Prince Louis gives his advice ahead of the Euros.
There we go. It's Tuesday, the 11th.
Better luck next hour.
11th of June. Rishi Sunak's expected to put another cut to national insurance at the heart of the Conservative manifesto. The Work and Pensions Minister was coy this morning. I thought I had you then. I thought you were going to say that it was in the manifesto.
You know, if I did that for anybody, it would be for you. But I'm afraid I'm not going to divulge all the details.
Good morning, Kay. Will this manifesto launch here at Silverstone help the Conservative Party to victory or see them crash and burn?
We're back on the campaign trail with the Liberal Democrats. They'll be hoping to sell their own manifesto to voters here in their former heartlands in the southwest.
Also ahead, booze bans, travel restrictions and riot police. Germany gets ready for England and the Euros. The last moments of TV doctor Michael Mosley. A coroner says he died after stopping to lie down in searing heat.
Here in Greece, a single white flower has been laid in tribute in the spot where he died.
Apple unveils its plans to put artificial intelligence into the iPhone and the pockets of over 1 billion people.
There's a ghost in my house. I can't hide from the ghost of your love that's inside. It keeps on haunting me.
And the loneliness of fame. Billie Eilish speaks out about the shock of being ghosted.
You're gone, but my heart keeps holding on to the memories of those.
Good morning. Our top story. The Conservatives are expected to promise tax cuts and more help for first-time buyers when they publish their manifesto this morning. Rishi Sunak will seek to present himself as the heir to Margaret Thatcher in what could be his last big chance to rescue his party's campaign. In the last hour, we spoke to Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride, who didn't give much away about what's in the manifesto, but insisted cutting people's tax will be at its heart.
You're going to see two very different manifestos. Ours that we're launching today, at its heart, is going to be cutting people's tax and making sure that they have a secure financial future. With Labour later on, I think you're going to see questions around tax rises, particularly because of this £38.5 billion spending black hole that they have in the offer that they're putting forward.
So a 2p cut in national insurance contributions. What else?
So, well, you're going to have to wait to see the full manifesto
I thought I
a
had
little
you
bit
then.
later, but we... sorry, say again?
I said I thought I had you then. I thought you were going to say that it was in the manifesto.
You know, if I did that for anybody, it would be for you. But I'm afraid I'm not going to divulge all the details of the manifesto before it's officially announced.
Rishi Sunak has finally spoken to the media again, saying that he didn't consider resigning as Prime Minister after his gaffe, let's call it, on the Normandy beaches. Should he have considered his position?
Well, I think he did exactly what he should do, which was he very quickly recognised that he had made a mistake. He apologised unequivocally and very publicly for that mistake. But look, Rishi Sunak is somebody I know reasonably well. He will have felt this very deeply personally because he is a deeply patriotic person. And now he did, and that's why obviously he did attend the events in Portsmouth. He met veterans, many veterans actually in Normandy at all the British
You mustn't try and
events,
defend
but he
it,
recognises that he made a mistake. Sorry?
You mustn't try and defend what he did.
I'm not saying he didn't make a mistake. I'm accepting that entirely. Indeed, the Prime Minister is. And I think what he's now saying is that he hopes that people have it in their heart to forgive him. So I don't think anybody's saying that what happened was anything other than a mistake, and that mistake has been accepted, and a full apology has been provided. But I'm making a broader point. You know, like our commitment, for example, to defence, where 2.5% by 2030 is very strong. Our commitment to veterans,
leave it
having a minister around the
him having
cabinet table,
apologised, and
are evidence of his commitment.
Darren standing by for us. He's going to have to keep dealing with this until he has a more fulsome apology, I think, probably. Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, yesterday I was with the Prime Minister and he did go a bit further, he did on Friday, but clearly a lot of people are very angry about all of this, Kay. I was in Horsham, which is normally a very safe Conservative seat. And frankly, I could only find one person who was going to back the Conservative Party. A lot of people saying they don't know or they're going to stay at home. And that really is a big concern for the Prime Minister. And that is why today, frankly, is so important, Kay. I'm going to keep the F1 puns to a low here, but he does need to kind of rev up his campaign, if you like, turn the corner. He's not exactly in pole position. What are we going to hear, though? We're going to hear, as you've rightly pointed out with Mel Stride there, this announcement on a further 2p cut to national insurance. Now, that would effectively half the rate if the Conservatives get re-elected in the last year or so. It is a significant tax cut, but also, don't forget, both parties are committed to that threshold rise when it comes to income tax, so effectively dragging lots more people, millions more people, into paying tax, irrespective of this national insurance change. But also, lots of the announcements we've kind of heard over the last couple of weeks, whether it's on 8,000 police officers from yesterday, that national service announcement, the greater protections for pensioners in terms of their income tax. The Conservative Party have spent this campaign launching lots of ideas, and we'll hear them all again today from the Prime Minister. Another one we all like to hear, though, is when it comes to stamp duty. The Prime Minister suggesting that he's going to get rid of that for first-time buyers up to £425,000. He did admit yesterday that trying to get on the housing ladder under the Conservative Party has become more difficult. But I think the big thing is, can he really change this campaign with this announcement today? He is trying to make tax the key dividing line between him and the Labour Party. He is hoping that that will be a stark choice for voters. But this is one of the last opportunities to try and change that 20-point deficit the Conservatives find themselves in the polls. And if today doesn't go well, things are going to get pretty desperate, I would suggest, for Rishi Sunak. I do, though, suspect we may well see a surprise Kay today. Lots of people suggesting over the last 24 hours the Prime Minister needs to go even further on taxation, maybe on the European Court of Human Rights too. Let's wait and see. We're going to have the manifesto launch at 11:30.
OK, it'll be live, of course, here on Sky News for now. Thanks, Darren. Matthew Thompson is in Torquay with the Lib Dems for us this morning. They launched their manifesto yesterday. Any more stunts planned today?
Yes, they launched their manifesto yesterday, and I don't believe I'm revealing too much to say they might also be launching something else today, by which I mean a craft of some description onto this beautiful water you can see behind me. But I can't tell much more than that because I don't know much more than that, but we will be braced to join them in the water if needs be, and we've got our trunks with us just in case. Look, they're here in the southwest, as they so often have been this election campaign, because it's former Liberal Democrat heartlands like this that they've really got to win back if they want to have a successful election campaign. They now have their own manifesto that they launched yesterday. It's full of retail-friendly policies like free personal care for the elderly and the disabled, policies on sewage, for example, which they think play well in places like this. But broadly speaking, Kay, I have to say, the Liberal Democrat manifesto has been greeted as a cautious document, perhaps uncharitably you might say an unambitious document. And why do I say that? Well, look, Ed Conway, Sky News' very own Ed Conway, said yesterday that it was about half as ambitious in terms of its spending pledges as their 2019 manifesto. But I don't think that's accidental. They're very much playing it safe this time around.
OK, for now, thank you. Just a reminder, we'll bring you the Conservative Manifesto launch live to you here on Sky News. It's expected at about 11:30 thereabouts. Don't be surprised if it's a little bit late, but 11:30 is when it's slated. Then tomorrow morning, I'm going to be in Cleethorpes for a special programme ahead of the Sky News Leaders event, the Battle for Number 10. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer will be grilled by our political editor, Beth Rigby, and face a live studio audience here on Sky News tomorrow from 7 p.m. In other news, authorities in Greece have said that the TV doctor, Michael Mosley, died of natural causes on the day he went missing on the Greek island of Symi. Let's get more, should we, with Sadia, who's standing by on the island of Rhodes, which is where his body was taken, I believe, for a post-mortem. Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Yeah, there are lots of questions still remaining. The first of them is, why did it take so long for his body to be found when he was so close to a resort and a helicopter hovered over that area the night before and a CCTV picked up his last movements? Why wasn't that footage looked at earlier? And the other question, I guess, is what happened to him? So we, unlike in the UK, here in Greece, they don't release publicly a coroner's report. So although we know that the autopsy has been complete, the toxicology results haven't come back, but the whole picture hasn't been released. What a police source has told us is that there was no third-party involvement, there was no foul play, and there were no injuries on his body to indicate that he had died from any injuries. So that would all indicate that it was a death of natural causes. But on the island of Simi, there are flat floral tributes being laid. We saw a single white flower being laid in tribute in the spot he died. And here in Rhodes, where Dr. Mosley's body is, we expect that to be repatriated the next few days and that his family are likely to travel with him home.
OK, for now, thank you. Oh, such a tragedy, isn't it?
Hugely so.
I mean, if there's any comfort for the family, it's that he died on the day that he went missing, and he wasn't trapped anywhere for long periods of time. But nevertheless, it's a tragedy.
Hugely, especially when you see the distances involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And remarkable to hear from his old friend as well.
Yeah.
Talking about him earlier in the last hour.
Yeah, such a modest man.
Very much so. It was surprising to hear how shy he was, considering how outgoing and how much he's kind of transformed society on such a grand scale. Huge thoughts with everyone involved with that. Meanwhile, turn our attention to Israel, because a three-stage ceasefire proposal calling for a full and immediate end to fighting between Israel and Hamas has been approved by the UN Security Council. Well, let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who joins us from Jerusalem. Alistair, how much do you think this agreement at the UN will change the facts on the ground?
Well, I mean, so often we're critical of the United Nations for failing to come to an agreement because one country or another has its own sort of personal interests at play. So we mustn't be too sniffy when the UN Security Council does manage to come to almost a unanimous agreement. It was just the Russians who decided to abstain. Having said that, I'm not convinced that it's going to make much difference, certainly in the immediate term. Israel, we have been told, has approved the proposal that was put forward by Joe Biden about 2 weeks ago, although it would still need to get through the Israeli cabinet, and that's not guaranteed because of the far-right members of it. It's really Hamas that have yet to give a formal proposal, and so that's why there's been very little progress made. Now, Hamas, after the UN agreed on the resolution, said that they welcomed it, but it's unclear whether or not that was some sort of formal recognition or whether that was coming from political leaders in Qatar and not the Hamas leaders in Gaza. And so really we still wait to see what Hamas's formal position is, and that is why the Secretary of State Antony Blinken is here yet again to try and push the players to come to some sort of agreement.
Alistair, appreciate it as ever. Thank you. Jurors in Hunter Biden's gun trial have begun deliberations following the trial of the president's son. It's the first of two cases he's expected to face during his father's re-election campaign. Mr. Biden has pleaded not guilty to all three charges. The main shipping canal into Baltimore's port has fully reopened following the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge back in March. The channel was blocked by the wreckage of the fallen bridge, which collapsed after a container ship lost power and crashed into one of its supporting columns, killing 6 road workers. It comes after a massive clean-up effort as crews removed an estimated 50,000 tonnes of steel and concrete which had fallen into the river. An Austrian Airlines pilot's been called a hero after successfully landing a plane that was despite severe damage. The flight from Mallorca to Vienna unintentionally flew into a thunderstorm unbeknownst to the crew. Heavy hailstones shattered the windscreen and ripped the nose off the plane. All 173 passengers and 6 crew on board landed safely.
Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, joining us now. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. Before we go on to anything else, how can a 12-year-old buy a machete and with his 12-year-old mate massacre a young man on the streets of Britain in the 21st century?
I can barely find the words of this absolutely heinous crime. One of the things that I've really, frustrated is not the right word, it's not a strong enough word. One of the things I've been infuriated by is I think about some of the tragedies that have occurred in my own constituency in the last 9 years. Sword attacks, a pregnant woman killed with a crossbow. It is far too easy to buy these weapons. We need to clamp down on sales. We do also need to make sure that we take a tough line when it comes to policing and then enforcement with really tough penalties for offenders. We've put forward those proposals in opposition. We will take them forward if we win the next general election. But you just look at the horror of this crime and the age of the perpetrators. Something's gone really badly wrong with our society. And I think we need a return to the approach of tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. And that's the approach that Labour's setting out in our manifesto later this week, that Yvette Cooper, our Shadow Home Secretary, has been talking about in recent days. Because, when something like this happens, and I think what's changed actually in our country in recent years, there's a danger that these sorts of things become normalised, that we become desensitised, and you pick up the newspaper or turn on the TV and there's yet another horrific crime involving young people. We must never allow this to become normalised. We must never lessen our outrage, but we do need that tough on crime and tough on the cause of crime approach to reducing violent crime and keeping young people safe.
How can we trust Labour on this, though, when knife crime in London has risen year on year under a Labour mayor?
Well, there have been challenges in violent crime right across the country. We know that there are challenges in big cities, but we also know that when it comes to policing and the criminal justice system, that we will have a responsibility, if we are in government, to make sure that we provide mayors right across the country and communities across the country with the levels of policing they need. Our commitment to rebuild neighbourhood policing with 13,000 more police officers, that's crucial for intelligence-led policing, for building relationships with communities, to know where the drug dealers are, where the drug dealing's happening, to know with and from young people who's carrying knives on our high streets and in our communities, how young people are feeling going to and from school or to and from the places they like to socialise. That intelligence-led approach is crucial. You also need a criminal justice system that works, and to make sure that you've got the prison places so that we're not releasing violent offenders early, as we've seen happening in recent months, that we're not telling courts to hold off on processing and sending criminals to prison, as we've seen in recent months under the Conservatives. So I don't pretend that these are easy challenges to solve. And this is one of a whole number of really difficult, serious challenges we will face if we win the general election. But we've got a strong programme to implement on this if we are given the chance. And that's about policing, it's about strong and tough justice, and it's also about the deterrence, the diverting young people from crime. And one of the policies I'm actually most excited about are our Young Futures hubs, which is a sort of, programme for teenagers, which will bring together a range of services.
OK, I'll come to that. But I go back to my point, which is that knife crime has increased 20% year on year under a Labour mayor. So how can we trust Labour to tackle knife crime if you become the next government?
Well, because we have to give our mayors the tools to do the job. And this is a challenge right across the country, in big cities, in urban areas.
In other cities, it's
cuts
London.
Cuts to policing haven't helped. The state of our justice system hasn't helped. The cuts to youth services haven't helped. And that's why I think Labour's approach will be far more effective than we've seen under the Conservatives. And I urge people to give change a chance when they go to vote on July the 4th. Look, we've got to take a tougher approach, but that means also giving the police the tools to do the job, whether that's more police officers and rebuilding neighbourhood policing, as we've committed to, making sure that the penalties, the criminal justice is there, and also to make sure that the prevention work is there too. I think all of those ingredients are absolutely essential, as is stop and search, which is a crucial tool in the fight against crime. And I know it's not uncontroversial, but believe me, I'd much rather have an uncomfortable conversation with someone that was stopped, unfortunately, than have a conversation with a grieving family about why their son's been stabbed to death on the streets.
And we could continue on with that point, but we've got much to get through, including the current crisis in children's dentistry.
Yes, that's right. And NHS dentistry is in a real state right across the country. We've got to rebuild NHS dentistry, and while we do that, Labour's first step will be to deliver 700,000 extra emergency dentistry appointments, 100,000 of which will be allocated specifically for children, so they get that access to the emergency dental care that they need. That's a £1 billion commitment that will be funded by closing the tax loopholes on tax avoidance, non-dom tax status too, and that will make a real difference to tackling our dentistry crisis. And Kay, sorry, I think I just said £1 billion. Actually, it's 100 million. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it depends whether you're going with American numbers or not as to whether it's £1 billion, isn't it? I get that. How are you actually going to pay for it, though? Just remind me where that money is actually going to come from.
So there's two components to the £1.6 billion package on NHS waiting overall. That's partly by clamping down on tax avoidance. So there is a significant tax gap in this country of the taxes that are owed to HMRC but aren't paid. We're going to clamp down on that, giving HMRC some additional resources to do that job, and that will generate the income that we need to fund our NHS pledge as well as others, and also closing down the remaining loopholes for non-dom tax status. Because despite all of the toing and froing we've had with the Conservatives on that front, it is still the case that there are loopholes there, so we will close them off. We think those are fairer choices, and when people see Labour's manifesto on Thursday, you will see where the money's come from and where the money's being spent. And I think that will be a combination of fairer choices on how we raise the money and wiser choices on where we spend the money. And at the heart of that is a commitment not to increase taxes on working people. So we've ruled out increases in income tax, national insurance and VAT, because we know that working people are really feeling the pinch at the moment. They're being really clobbered by the Conservatives. And we don't think that that's right or fair.
Capital gains tax?
Nothing in Labour's manifesto requires changes to capital gains tax, increases in capital gains tax. Nothing in Labour's manifesto. I think on this, Kay, Rachel Reeves has made very clear we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. What we are trying to do, and what we will do if we win the general election, is try and lower the burden of taxation on people. So we're not looking to clobber people with higher tax rises, because we just know people can't afford it right now. That does mean tough choices and honest choices. So today we're going to have a big splurge of spending and tax cuts from Rishi Sunak when the money isn't there. What you'll get on Thursday from Labour. What we'll get on Thursday from Labour is a manifesto where the promises we make are promises we can keep and promises that you and your viewers can afford. And I think that's a much more responsible and fairer approach.
Council tax?
Well, on council tax, that has risen year after year under the Conservatives, because they keep on passing on and devolving cuts and blame to local councils, forcing council tax up, leaving people saying, well, why am I paying more and getting less?
The Tories talking about you. What are you guys going to do?
Well, the central challenge, Kay, and the reason why we've got the highest burden of taxation in 70 years and the approach Labour will take to get that burden down, we've got to get growth back into the economy. Why do we have a high tax economy? Because we have a low growth economy. And if the economy had grown...
Mr Streeting.
If we had grown, the economy had grown under this government at the rate it had grown under the last Labour government, there'd be over £30 billion available to either invest in our public services or to return to people through tax cuts, without having to hike up taxes for someone somewhere else. And that's the consequence of 14 years of low growth.
What
and so
do, and it sounds to me as though we're going to get clobbered on our council tax.
No, we don't want to see people clobbered on council tax. What I will say on that and every other promise we make, the promises we make are promises we can keep and the country can afford. It will be a fully costed, fully funded manifesto with promises we can keep and you can afford. And that is why... Well, House. And there's a serious point here, though, Kay, which is that we have, for weeks and months now, in fact years, and including when I've been on your programme, and people have said, well, will you spend money in X area, or will you cut taxes in Y area? And often we've had to say no to things that we'd probably quite like to do, but at this stage, unless we can say that the promise can be kept and the country can afford that promise, we're not going to make those promises. And that's why I'll be able to come on your programme and others in the coming weeks after Labour's manifesto and look your viewers in the eye and say the promises we make are promises we can keep and promises that you can afford. Rishi Sunak cannot say that. He won't be able to say that after today, and if he does, he's lying to you.
OK, well, they said about you guys as well, so let's wait and see, should we? We're sort of in an election run-up, so lots of strong words either side, but let's see what happens come the 5th of July. It's good to see you as always. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Take care.
You too. Morning.
Good morning, Kay.
Interesting. Was it not? You're here to talk about wages, though.
Yes.
It's Paul, by the way. Not that you didn't know.
He's clearly played bingo.
Yeah.
Economic data this morning from the Office for National Statistics.
Have you got your mic?
My microphone.
Should I keep talking until... It's interesting, actually, to hear from him on Teesside. We're going to be talking about dentistry. We've got your VT. We're going to look at that, our videotape from Paul, and we're back in just a second to hear more from him.
Oh, it's a bit smoky in here.
Nice.
I need to stop smoking so much in here. I do.
Michael is unemployed and lives alone. He's just enough space for his hobbies.
Keeps you busy, you know what I mean? It's something to do. Between that, teaching myself a bit of Latin and whatever else, it just keeps me out of mischief.
But after 6 years out of work, he's stuck in a rut and says he wants a job.
People must think like, oh, it's all right to be on the dole and not have to do anything, but it's boring. You know your money and when it's going to run out.
Michael's first steps back towards the workplace have brought him to the council-led employment hub in Middlesbrough, a front line in a workforce crisis driven by long-term sickness and mental health.
Economically inactive for the last 4 weeks, and there's no chance of you going back to work in the next 2 weeks, is that right?
That's holding the economy back and pushing the welfare bill up.
They get used to that pot of money that's coming in, and it's very difficult with the cost of living crisis at the moment. Sometimes it is a bit of a vicious circle that they want to work full-time, but ultimately they'll be worse off with the benefits being taken off them.
It makes it feel like work doesn't pay.
You could say that, yeah, but it's that sense of achievement at the end of the week.
The balance between welfare and work is policed by job centres. If you're unemployed, you have to attend a weekly appointment, but those signed off sick don't have to look for work, a system that can be open to abuse.
We hear people talking about mental health and almost as if it's the new bad back, you know, it's an excuse. People get signed off and it's a way of playing the system. Would you recognise that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm saying yes, definitely. We have to be able to, question, and ask, because not only is it our job to support the public, we've also got to protect the public purse.
The solution to the workforce crisis is often said to be to get tough, to make the benefits regime less generous, sick notes harder to come by. But the evidence here in Middlesbrough is it is not as simple as that. The impact of poverty and ill health means many people need an enormous amount of support before they can even think about getting a job.
Fantastic. Michael says he wants to work, but he knows his ambition is fragile.
I feel like I want to get back into work or something, and if I maybe don't do that, Especially if, like, only yourself to talk to. Sometimes you can, like, you go backwards, you lose the confidence.
For the next government, rebuilding the economy means repairing the workforce. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Middlesbrough.
You're telling me about the figures, Paul?
Yes, it was the wrong kind of mic drop. Apologies. This is data from the ONS this morning. The labour market statistics tells us all sorts of things. It tells us things about wages. Wages are rising about 6% in real terms. That's 3.2% in money in your pocket compared to inflation. That's the highest level in 4 years. That's good news for workers. Bank of England might give them pause to think about raising interest rates. Less likely now, the market thinks. Really interesting, the economic inactivity data, which was what we were talking to people there in Middlesbrough about. This is people who aren't looking to work or can't work because they're ill. And it's up at its highest level since 2011, 9.4 million people. That's more than 22% of the population. Of those, 2.8 million are long-term sick, and that's up 650,000 since COVID. So we have nearly 1 million vacancies in the economy, jobs that need filling, and we've got this huge rise in people who aren't working or can't work, and it's a massive challenge. Holding back growth is pushing up the benefits bill, and whoever gets in on July the 5th, it's a very tough nut to crack, and as we can see from there, it is not straightforward. There's no quick fix.
OK, for now, thanks. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. We're going to be talking about knife crime on Britain's streets as two 12-year-old boys found guilty of murdering this teenager, Sean Sisahi, with a machete. Plus, how tech giant Apple could soon be bringing AI to your fingertips. And another busy week for the King as he prepares for his birthday parade.
Westminster may seem far from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer, live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
do you think of Wes Streeting this morning?
So Wes Streeting really keen to talk about dentistry, NHS dentistry and the state of that. And you can understand why, NHS dentistry is actually really quite difficult to access. But what I found most interesting were two topics. So first of all, you grilled him on knife crime, and specifically in the capital of London. We know that
20% year on year.
Exactly. So you put that to him, and Sadiq Khan is a Labour mayor in charge of crime in London. Now, Sadiq Khan's team would argue that, yes, they are in charge of crime, but there are certain things that are still coming from central government in terms of funding and things like that. But nonetheless, the fact that it's gone up rather than down... Now,
20%.
Exactly, huge amount. Now, Wes Streeting was trying to say, well, there's been cuts to policing, there's been cuts to youth services, cuts to the justice system. And he said, we need to give mayors the tools to do their job properly. That's all fine, but that's essentially suggesting that Sadiq Khan has not been given the right tools to be able to tackle knife crime. Some would argue that's a little bit of a stretch, considering, as you say, the massive increase. Second of all, if Labour win the election and knife crime does not come down in London, that excuse becomes utterly redundant and is quite a dangerous position for them to be in. So they will need to deliver in places like London, otherwise they have no excuse left for why it's going up. Second thing, tax. So we've had this back and forth about capital gains tax, haven't we, with the Labour Party? And again this morning, Wes Streeting saying, no, nothing in the manifesto requires us to increase capital gains tax. But nonetheless, then it doesn't seem like they're ruling it out completely and utterly if they then get a hold of the public finances and find out, oh gosh, it's worse than we thought. So I think they're trying to tread really, really carefully about exactly what they can and can't say with capital gains tax. But he was trying to shut that, kind of speculation down this morning on that, which is exactly what Bridget Phillipson did yesterday. But then Jonathan Ashworth yesterday afternoon slightly undid some of that. So there's a little bit of a grey area around capital gains tax for the Labour Party. But they're trying to say, no plans to do so. Doesn't mean they won't do it. It means for now, there are no plans.
OK. Thanks very much. Top stories?
Yes, let's remind you of our headlines this hour. It's 8:36. The Conservative Manifesto will be launched later this morning at Silverstone Racetrack. Rishi Sunak expected to promise a 2p cut in national insurance if he is re-elected. Foul play has been ruled out in the death of Michael Mosley as CCTV footage appears to show him falling over close to where his body was found. Greek police have told Sky News there were no injuries on the TV doctor's body that could have caused his death. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet with Israeli officials today before arriving in Jordan for ceasefire talks. The United Nations Security Council yesterday voted to support a deal aimed at ending the fighting between Israel and Hamas. And Germany is ramping up security ahead of the start of the European Championship this week. Police and security forces across the country have been training for a range of scenarios, from hooligans to terrorism and cyber attacks.
Two 12-year-olds are thought to have become the UK's youngest convicted killers after being found guilty of murdering 19-year-old Sean Sihahi with a machete in Wolverhampton last November. Alison Cope is an anti-violence campaigner, actually, and she's with us now. Hi, Alison. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Absolutely staggering.
Yeah, it is. It's just so sad for, Sean, his family and everyone involved in this. And sadly, we've had these headlines many times of young people being stabbed, using weapons, and it's just got out of control. And it's very frustrating for someone like me to hear the approaches to knife crime, and we're failing.
How do we get to the point where a 12-year-old can buy a machete for £40?
Exactly. How have we got to that point? How have we got to the point where the mindset of a 12-year-old is to purchase a murder weapon, take photographs of it, present it on social media, and believe that is genuinely an acceptable way to present themselves online? How did nobody pick up that those photographs were being posted to give an indication we have a huge problem that needs addressing? And I think we're just letting so many young people fall through the cracks, and the consequence is stabbings and murders across the UK.
Someone sent me an email this morning when we've been talking about this, Alison, showing me how you can actually buy a knife on Amazon and have it delivered to your home. This kid, spent £40 on a machete and managed to purchase it. What do we need to start to do to try to make sure that that just doesn't happen? I know there are laws in place that mean that it shouldn't happen, but it quite clearly is.
Yeah, and then it just opens up a can of worms, doesn't it? Who's going to actually make sure that this isn't happening? We don't have enough people, we don't have enough resources. You know, many debates of the cuts are having a big impact. They obviously are. Who's going to man social media and man online sales? We don't have the resources. The number one murder weapon within the West Midlands is a kitchen knife. So that, for me, highlights the need to change the mindset of many, many young people in this country. West Midlands has higher knife crime figures than London now. We've allowed it to get out of control to that point. And I just hope that those that have the powers really take a step back, sit around the table and make sure that the same mistakes are not repeated. We talk about the mayors, you know, Manchester Mayor, for example, is doing an exceptionally good job and he's been given the same funding as other mayors. It's just what we do with that funding, how we allocate it, how we make sure it is effective and follow that through to reach as many young people as we possibly can. And it's very inconsistent. Some areas are doing a great job, other areas need improvement.
What would you like the next Home Secretary, whether it's Yvette Cooper or James Cleverly, to do to try to make sure that something like this never happens again?
To make it compulsory in education is a very good starting point, because you're never going to have so many young people listening in front of you. We've got to start somewhere. So I think first and foremost, compulsory in education, and then we need to have a consistent approach around the UK so a young person knows that this behaviour is not acceptable and there will be consequences. Whereas at the moment, it's very inconsistent. If you're caught with a weapon, you might get a verbal warning, you might get probation, you might go to prison. That's a very, you know, watered down consequence. It needs to be strong, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be across the UK. We don't want young people thinking that they can get away with this, and when they face the consequences, somebody has been killed, and that's, you know, we don't want it to get to that far anymore. We just want it to be, you know, stopped and prevented. And, you know, we've got too many young people that are dead, too many young people in prison. It's got out of control. I have met with, you know, Yvette Cooper and had some great conversations. But I think the focus is going to be on gangs, is going to be on drugs, which is very important. But we need to address social media mindset and a consistent approach. Until we see that, we're going to have this conversation many more times.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Branches of Barclays Bank in England and Scotland have been targeted by pro-Palestinian protest groups. 15 sites were covered with red paint and had windows broken. The group, Palestinian Action, has accused Barclays of having a financial interest in selling weapons to Israel, a claim the bank has denied. Let's get more with our business presenter, Ian King. Hi, Ian. Is there any truth in this?
Hello, Kay. Yes, well, we've talked about this before. We had a similar outbreak of these kind of acts of vandalism back in early March. All of this seems to stem from research that's been published by an organisation called the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. They claim that Barclays owns some £1 billion worth of shares in defence companies and provides financial support totalling £3 billion to other defence companies, some of which supply the Israeli Defence Force. Now, what this organisation has put out is actually inaccurate to an extent, because Barclays has been very, very clear it doesn't own shares in any of these defence companies. The error arises from the fact that back in 2000, well, Barclays used to own a business called BGI, Barclays Global Investors. It sold that back in 2009, so it isn't a direct investor in any defence companies. It is true to say that it provides financial services to some defence contractors, and this is what Barclays has to say. We provide vital financial services to US, UK and European public companies that supply defence products to NATO and its allies. Barclays does not directly invest in these companies. The defence sector is fundamental to our national security, and the UK government has been clear that supporting defence companies is compatible with environmental, social and governance considerations. Decisions on the implementation of arms embargoes to other nations are the job of elected governments. While we support the right to protest, we ask that campaigners do so in a way which respects our customers, colleagues and property. Now, it's interesting, Kay, to point out that on this occasion, these latest attacks on Barclays branches have also been joined by not only this organisation, Palestinian Action, but by another organisation called Shut the System, which is some sort of climate group, which kind of suggests that, you do have these kind of protest groups that act on the sort of fringes of politics, that often seize on a particular issue, but quite often they're going for one particular target for a number of reasons. I should also stress, Kay, that Barclays is not the only organisation that's been targeted by some of these protesters. The likes of McDonald's, Starbucks and Coca-Cola have also been singled out.
OK, for now, thank you. Apple AI, what's all that about? Tell me more.
Good morning. Well, theoretically, your phone is going to get easier to use.
Okay.
So Apple has added, or is going to add, artificial intelligence into our iPhones to make it a more personal experience, a more tailored experience to the user. It's called Apple Intelligence, and it will do things like generate text or generate images, and also it will make the Hey Siri function easier to use.
So it's going to spy on me?
Actually, it's just come up, my Hey Siri, funnily enough, saying that. So it's after many of Apple's rivals like Microsoft and Google started to introduce AI into their software. And essentially, artificial intelligence, because it is a bit of a confusing concept, is like machine learning. The phone will learn based on what we type in or text to our friends or family. But not everyone is really happy with this coming out. Elon Musk, the owner of X and Tesla, has cited concerns about security and about data, but Apple has very strenuously said that people's data will be secure. But we might be able to see things like ChatGPT being used in our phones. This is that well-known chatbot.
You use that, don't you?
I have used it to plan what was a very wet holiday in Budapest. So sadly...
So it didn't predict the weather then?
Sadly, it didn't go that far, but it had lots of uses. I could put in when I wanted to put my flights in, how long I was there for, what I wanted to see, and then it came up with options, and I said, oh, you could, I'd like X amount of time more at this place, and it would amend the timetable. So it's set to make it more, it's set to make it easier for people to use phones, but Elon Musk a little bit unhappy about this.
Oh, well, there we are. It's good to see you, thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. King Charles prepares to attend Trooping the Colour to mark his official birthday. We'll talk more with Jack in just a second. I particularly like the story about you having to convince David Bowie to take part in the Glastonbury Festival. You'd sort of set that up.
Yeah, that was funny. David wasn't that keen on doing big festivals at that time, and he was doing his own sort of quiet shows, enjoying life, just got married to Iman, everything was fine. And Glastonbury weren't super keen on him. They were worried he was going to do something very obscure, left field, like Tin Machine or whatever. And the promoter, John Giddings, said to me, look, let's get him to do it. And so I leaked a story to the Sunday Times. And my idea was it would be in one of the columns there. Wouldn't it be a great idea if Bowie played Glastonbury? Unbeknown to me, it ended up on the front page. Bowie headlines Glastonbury. Newspapers went, the phones went crazy. They sold out all the tickets in a couple of hours. Glastonbury had a complete meltdown. And then the phone went quiet for 3 days, and I never heard a word from David. And I thought, oh my God, he must be furious. He didn't want to play a festival. He's booked in the biggest festival in the world. And after about 3 days, I got this message. Julian, who worked with me, and it said, you naughty boys, don't ever do that again. But it was great, David said. And of course, it turned out to be the biggest one ever. I think the walls came down. They had 120,000 people, and it went down in legend. And it changed the sort of trajectory of David's career. I loved working with the Spice Girls. They were so much fun and hilarious and great individuals, all of them. When I first got hired by them, my feet didn't touch the ground for a few days. I was flown out to Rome And in fact, this is the thing, I had to go down, they were doing a little show there, and I got a call from my lawyer at the time, a guy called Alexis. He said, I've just seen you. Why are you going down the Via Garibaldi in Rome? I said, well, how do you know I'm there? He said, I'm watching Sky News, and they're actually plotting your course on the way from the airport to the hotel. And at that point, I realised how big the news was. The next day, we flew to Paris in a private jet to go shopping, as you do. Then we went to a disco in Madrid or something. And I remember then I finally sat down with the girls. And I remember talking to Victoria, and she was so funny. And I remember thinking, you've been misnamed. Forget Posh Spice, you're Witty Spice. And at that point, in all seriousness, I thought there's such smart individuals. Let's bring out the media and the newspapers, and everyone can handle this individually. You don't need to be protected as a group. And so it came to be.
Time of the week when we want to talk about the royals. Jack is here with us. They've been busy this week, haven't they?
They have been busy.
Can we talk about the Princess of Wales to start with?
Yes.
What's the latest?
Well, I think it's starting to all cheer up a little bit. So Prince William met a D-Day veteran last week who asked him, you know, how's Kate doing? Is she doing any better? And he certainly appeared, not great audio on the video, but he seemed to say that she was doing better. And then Saturday came around. Kate missed the Colonel's Review, which is the rehearsal for Trooping the Colour, the King's birthday parade. She sent the Irish Guards a letter apologising and saying how proud she was of them, but she also said she hoped to be back representing them very soon.
Oh, very soon?
Very soon. Now, we shouldn't read too much into it, but it is an optimistic use of language. It might be tempting to think very soon means she'll appear at Trooping the Colour this Saturday. That would certainly be very soon. I think that would probably also be a little bit presumptuous. Some people have also mentioned that in the actual text of the letter, they've noticed a couple of spelling mistakes, which maybe suggests it hasn't been quite as thoroughly proofread by aides as we might ordinarily expect from a document of this kind. But it's
this
also...
was the last time we saw her really in public, apart from on the bench.
Yes, indeed. So this looks like Christmas Day.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So it's a long time. It's been more than 6 months, and people would love to see her again. And if she did make it to Trooping the Colour, a couple of minutes on the balcony, a little wave, you know, look after the kids for a little bit up there, I think people would absolutely love that as a very dramatic return to the royal fold.
We've seen much of her boys, her two sons, and indeed her husband.
Yeah, well, William has also had a bit of a busy time, busier than we were expecting with the election going on in the background, but he had a real statesman moment at D-Day last week. He was at the international D-Day ceremony, unlike the Prime Minister. Shook hands with
Prime
Biden.
Minister.
Yes, indeed. Shook hands with Biden and really presented himself as being this kind of big international figure, which is a role that he loves to play at the moment, and I think he plays it well. There he is with Macron. It's also, you've got to think it's going to have a good knock-on effect for him for his Earthshot Prize ceremony, because that's very international, and he'd love, I'm sure, to have lots of support from all these political figures that he's shaking hands with here.
And he took Louis to see the England team before they set off.
Well, he went by himself, but he passed on a message from Louis.
Oh, I thought Louis was with him.
Unfortunately, for Louis will have to wait to meet the England team. He would have loved it, and George
he was
too.
being reasonable, because equal with both boys, because of course George
gets all the fun.
He went to the
George
FA
gets
Cup
all the
final,
fun.
didn't
Yeah, he does. Louis maybe when he's a bit older, but yeah, he passed on a very important message, which I have to say I stand by as well. Which Prince Louis says: if you want to set yourself up for a successful day, or indeed a successful UEFA Championship, Euro Championships, then have a double portion for breakfast. Which is something to live by.
That boy's going to be quite the character, isn't it?
You can see where he gets his energy from.
Yes, absolutely. And George, as you said, playing the role. Still in his suit and tie, but...
Still in his suit and tie, yeah. I mean, he loves these trips to the football. You can really see it on his face how much it means to him. I think Louis, arguably maybe a little young for a full 90-minute game. He's a similar kind of age to my son, and my son definitely solid 45 minutes, definitely loves it. I think a full 90 minutes, the attention can start to go a little bit.
Fair enough, especially if your team's losing.
Especially if your team...
What about the King?
Again, I think the King is doing well. At least, you know, Camilla has said, as we know with the King, that he's not doing what he's told, and he's pushing himself perhaps a little too hard. This was at the Queen's Reading Room Festival on Saturday. She was asked by the novelist Lee Child author of the Jack Reacher novels, you know, how's he getting on? And this is what she said. But she did say he's doing fine, and that's great to hear after such a busy week for him last week. He had back-to-back D-Day events, 2 days running. The first day, Wednesday in Portsmouth, and then Thursday he went over to Normandy, which is what we're seeing right here. And this is at the Royal British Legion D-Day commemoration. He's meeting veterans. So that is obviously going to take a huge amount out of a 75-year-old who's still receiving treatment for cancer.
I'm not sure why we're saying trooping the colour there, because he's not. But he will be doing that. That's
Saturday,
that's
yes.
his official birthday, isn't it?
Trooping the Colour is the official birthday. His actual birthday is November. Yeah, Trooping is Saturday, which he's going to take the salute from a carriage rather than the Buckingham Palace balcony.
Oh, is he?
Yes, but so that is an accommodation, but he will be able to be there, which is going to be a fantastic moment.
And what about his youngest son?
About Harry, well, Harry has had some kind of positive court news this week, although with a sting in the tail. Yeah. So he's appealing the decision to, well, he's appealing the loss of the lawsuit that was attempting to overturn the removal of his police protection. It's all getting very complicated.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say. What makes it more complicated is the judge has said, well, OK, we'll hear your appeal, that's fine, but, you know, don't get your hopes up.
No queue jumping.
No queue jumping, first of all, because they wanted the case over by the end of July. And also, you know, he's kind of said, well, actually, I might well find that the judge got it right in the first place anyway. It all comes down to this distinction of, you know, Harry lost his police protection when he lost his role, and most of the people who get it have it because of a role they perform. But there's this other category of other VIPs who get it for other reasons. Think Salman Rushdie getting it because of the Iran fatwa against him, that kind of thing. So Harry's saying, well, I should have been in that category. So that is the grounds on which the appeal will be heard.
OK.
We'll see what happens.
Good to see you. As always, see you next week. Thanks so much indeed. Now, if you've ever been ghosted, don't worry, you're not the only one. Pop superstar Billie Eilish has revealed she was speaking to someone last year who then completely cut off all contact without warning. She said she couldn't believe it when the person she was texting stopped replying one day. Apparently, they had plans to meet up, then she never heard from him again. Never happened to us, has it?
Happens to everyone these days.
Of course it does. Of course. Even to Billie Eilish. We won't ghost you. We'll see you in 2. morning, 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, it's Manifesto Day for the Conservatives. Is this the last big chance for Rishi Sunak to save his campaign?
Well, despite Kay's best efforts, Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride was very tight-lipped this morning, and avoiding questions was the theme of the morning too for Labour.
It's exactly right.
Also ahead, we're joined by Olympic legends Sir Steve Redgrave and Dave Thompson to hear about their new health initiative.
It's Tuesday, the 11th of June. Rishi Sunak's expected to put another cut to national insurance at the heart of the Conservative manifesto. The Work and Pensions Minister was coy this morning. I thought I had you then. I thought you were going to say that it was in the manifesto.
You know, if I did that for anybody, it would be for you. But I'm afraid I'm not going to divulge all the details.
Good morning, Kay. I am in Silverstone, where the Prime Minister will be hoping this manifesto launch will turbocharge his campaign, or will he remain in the pits?
And I'm here in Teesside, where Labour have promised to tackle the crisis in NHS dentist appointments.
Also ahead, booze bans, travel restrictions and riot police can only mean one thing. Germany gets ready for England at the Euros. Apple unveils its plans to put artificial intelligence into the iPhone and the pockets of over 1 billion people. And the loneliness of fame. Billie Eilish speaks out about the shock of being ghosted. The Conservatives are expected to promise tax cuts and more help for first-time buyers when they publish their manifesto this morning. Rishi Sunak will seek to present himself as the heir to Margaret Thatcher in what could be his last big chance to rescue his party's campaign. This morning we spoke to Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride, who didn't give much away about what's in the manifesto, but insisted cutting people's tax will be at its heart.
You're going to see two very different manifestos. Ours that we're launching today, at its heart, is going to be cutting people's tax and making sure that they have a secure financial future. With Labour later on, I think you're going to see questions around tax rises, particularly because of this £38.5 billion spending black hole that they have in the offer that they're putting forward.
So a 2p cut in national insurance contributions. What else?
So, well, you're going to have to wait to see the full manifesto
I thought I had
a little
you
bit
then.
later. But we... sorry, say again.
I said I thought I had you then. I thought you were going to say that it was in the manifesto.
You know, if I did that for anybody, it would be for you. But I'm afraid I'm not going to divulge all the details of the manifesto before it's officially announced.
Rishi Sunak has finally spoken to the media again, saying that he didn't consider resigning as Prime Minister after his gaffe, let's call it, on the Normandy beaches. Should he have considered his position?
Well, I think he did exactly what he should do, which was he very quickly recognised that he had made a mistake. He apologised unequivocally and very publicly for that mistake. But look, Rishi Sunak is somebody I know reasonably well. He will have felt this very deeply personally because he is a deeply patriotic person. And now he did, and that's why obviously he did attend the events in Portsmouth. He met veterans, many veterans actually in Normandy at all the British
You mustn't try and
events,
defend
but he
it, Mr.
recognises
Stride.
that he made a mistake. Sorry?
You mustn't try and defend what he did.
I'm not saying he didn't make a mistake. I'm accepting that entirely. Indeed, the Prime Minister is. And I think what he's now saying is that he hopes that people have it in their heart to forgive him. So I don't think anybody's saying that what happened was anything other than a mistake, and that mistake has been accepted and a full apology has been provided. But I'm making a broader point. You know, like our commitment, for example, to defence, we're 2.5% by 2030 is very strong. Our commitment to veterans,
leave it
having a minister around
as
the
him having
cabinet table,
apologised and we should have to try
are
and
evidence
accept his
of his
apology.
commitment.
It's going to haunt him, isn't it, Darren, tomorrow in just a second. But Darren, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think this is something that the Prime Minister is just simply unable to get away from, largely. I mean, I was with him yesterday, in which he did offer a bit more of a fulsome apology compared to last Friday, but for a lot of people, frankly, it is not enough. And I was in Horsham, a very safe Conservative seat in West Sussex, and I was trying to find some Conservative supporters. A lot of people simply said they weren't going to turn out to vote, and in part it was because of what happened with D-Day last week. Now, the Prime Minister is hoping that will change today here at Silverstone. I'm going to try and keep the puns, if you like, to a minimum, Kay. He is hoping to kind of rev up his campaign, to turn the corner quickly, maybe get back into pole position. But very easily, as I say, he could be stuck in the pits or he could crash and burn today, because this is and needs to be an absolute game changer for the Conservative Party. They are still 20 points behind in the polls. They need today to change the narrative. Now, what we likely hear from the Prime Minister later, as you have rightly found out from Mel Stride, it's going to be tax cuts at the centre of the Conservative offering a little later on. 2% of the national insurance again, effectively halving the rate over the past year. And in addition to that, we're also likely to hear extra help for first-time buyers. The Prime Minister admitting yesterday that under Conservatives, trying to buy a house has become more difficult. We believe they're going to get rid, effectively, of stamp duty up until £425,000 for those first-time buyers. But a lot of the stuff we've also heard before, Kay, whether it's on extra police officers, whether it's on that national service announcement, whether it's on further help for pensioners, the Conservative Party have announced quite a lot of this over the last couple of weeks, and that's why I think we may well get a surprise, whether it's going a bit further on tax or whether a bit further on the European Court of Human Rights when it comes to the Rwanda policy. I suspect the Prime Minister is going to have to try and pull a rabbit out of the hat.
OK, let's find out what's going to happen as far as Labour is concerned. We've been chatting to Wes Streeting in the last hour. Tomorrow, he's got lots to say about all sort of things, as you would expect.
That's right. We're at a school here in Teesside because Labour have a health policy today, which is they're going to create 100,000 more dentist appointments just for children. We know that they've been highlighting this for a while. We know that there's been lots of stories in the media about people unable to get an NHS dentist appointment, even ending up pulling out their own teeth because they can't get access to a dentist. And Labour have this statistic they keep using, which is that among children aged between 5 and 9, the most common cause of admission to hospital is tooth decay. It costs the NHS £65 million a year, and they say it's time to tackle that because there are hundreds of thousands fewer dentist appointments for children than there were, for example, back in 2018. How are they going to tackle it? Well, money. They say that it will cost £100 million, and that will be funded from the non-dom loophole they're going to close, although the government have already closed it, but they believe that they can still use some of that money to pay for this. They're also announcing that they would ban the sale of highly caffeinated energy drinks to children under 16. That's something we first reported on Sky earlier this year, with fines of £2,500 for shops that sell them to children. So some people will say this is the nanny state, but Labour clearly feel that when it comes to children's health, they want to take this more interventionist approach.
OK, tomorrow for now, thank you. I'm going to bring you the Conservative Manifesto launch live to you here on Sky News around about 11:30 this morning. Don't be surprised if it slips a little bit, but we will be here. Hopefully you will be too. Then tomorrow morning, I'm going to be in Cleethorpes for a special programme ahead of the Sky News Leaders event, the Battle for Number 10. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer will be grilled by our political editor, and Beth Rigby, of course, and face a live studio audience here on Sky News tomorrow from 7 p.m. Now, booze bans, travel restrictions and riot police, they are just some of the measures being prepared by German police ahead of the European Championships, with England's opening match against Serbia regarded as one of the most high-risk fixtures. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports.
In the German city of Gelsenkirchen, the spectators are also the spectacle. Police carefully watch over the crowd at this potentially volatile clash. At the gates, fans are randomly checked for weapons and booze. Inside, officers are on alert for troublemakers, honing in on a group of masked ultras gathering in the stands. This is where England will play their first game of the Euros against Serbia, It's been classed as high risk, so police are using this league match as a test run.
I think it's a very high-risk game because of the history, because of the hooligans both sides have. Like Serbia, they have many hools. The English guys with many alcohol, they are sometimes very aggressive. So it's a great job to do this, to prepare that, so that hopefully nothing will happen.
This is what they want to avoid. More than 1,500 people were arrested during the riots at the 2016 Euros in France. For high-risk matches here, they'll serve lower alcohol beer in the stadium and fans can't drink in the stands.
Young people coming for the first tournament, etc.
British police is sharing intel and thousands of hooligans have been banned from travelling.
Over 2,000 troublemakers away from football has made it a much safer place. And when you play that out over the last 10 years, 10 years, behaviour of football fans has been far, far better.
From fan violence to terror attacks, police and security services across Germany are training for a range of threats. Mobilising extra officers and security experts and increasing checks at stations and borders.
Policing the Euros is a complex challenge because it's not just about keeping the fans safe in the 10 stadiums where the games are being played. There are also the 12 million fans in the fan zones to look after.
In Thuringham, where England has its base camp, police have also been doing drills. They say the tense global situation makes security more complex. But Germany's determined it's ready and can protect the millions of football fans coming here. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
You don't get it, do you?
No. You're a fan of the game, and then you go and trash the place that's hosting the game for you. Makes no sense.
No,
Absolutely
I
not.
concur with your perspective.
And as a rugby fan, I can't help but draw parallels to the fact you don't see that at rugby matches, but you do see that at football matches.
Although when you say you're a rugby fan, you're a rugby union fan, so it doesn't really count.
Let's bring you some other stories this morning, shall we? Moving on, because developing news actually out of China. 4 American teachers in the country reportedly being stabbed in the northeast of China. Let's bring in our correspondent in the region, that's Nicole Johnston. Nicole, what more do we know about this?
Well, this is a highly unusual attack to have taken place. As you said, it was in northeast China, in the city of Jilin. It happened on Monday in broad daylight. 4 American teachers who were on an exchange program attacked while they were walking in a park. They had another member of their faculty with them. They'd been on an exchange at the city's university. They were from Iowa's Cornell College. So the pictures that have come out on social media, really dramatic. You see them on the ground, surrounded by blood. Some of them are trying to make telephone calls. Onlookers standing by, trying to help them, and then they're put into the back of ambulances. Now, all of this video has come out on social media outside of China, because inside China, this story had been censored to an extent. None of this video was available on Chinese social media. We have, however, heard from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China. They are calling it a random attack. We don't have any information about who carried it out or what the motive was behind it. And the college in the United States has said that it is serious. It doesn't appear to be life-threatening, but now there are efforts underway, of course, to try and get those 4 teachers back to the United States.
Nicole, for the moment, thank you so much. Jurors in Hunter Biden's gun trial have begun deliberations following the trial of the president's son. It's the first of 2 cases he's expected to face during his father's re-election campaign. Mr. Biden has pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. The main shipping channel into Baltimore's port has fully reopened following the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in March. The channel was blocked by wreckage from the fallen bridge, which collapsed after a container ship lost power and crashed into one of its supporting columns, killing 6 road workers. It comes after a massive clean-up effort removed an estimated 50,000 tonnes of steel and concrete that had fallen into the river below. An Austrian Airlines pilot's been called a hero after successfully landing a plane despite severe damage. The flight from Mallorca to Vienna unintentionally flew into a thunderstorm unbeknownst to the crew. Heavy hailstones shattered the windscreen and ripped off the nose of the plane. All 173 passengers and 6 crew on board did land safely.
Ripped off the nose of the plane.
It's a phrase you don't want to have to say, isn't it? It really is. And look at it, it's no understatement either, is it? And then how can they see the runway through those windows? Remarkable.
I know, all of those things.
All of these points, Gareth, I'm making to you repeatedly.
Yes.
But testament to everybody.
Absolutely. You wouldn't want to have been on that plane.
Well, I suppose it doesn't matter if you can see it if you've got your eyes closed. I would have had if I'd been the pilot, I think.
You responded in the last hour, oh, I had some hailstone in my garden.
Unseasonal they were, but they weren't like that.
Yes, indeed. So, you want to talk to us about wages?
Yeah, we've got labour market data from the Office for National Statistics today, which...
What? I always say, I struggle
the
with
ONS,
yes, exactly.
which tells us about people working, not working, and it's particularly interesting about this concept we talked a lot about in the last couple of years, economic inactivity. That's people who aren't looking to work or aren't able to work. That might be early retirees, you might be a carer, but it's also the long-term sick, and that number has risen again to the highest in since 2011, as far as I can see, 9.43 million people, more than 22% of the working-age population not working, and it's been driven up by long-term sickness. 2.83 million people not working because they're signed off sick. That's the highest figure since '92, since the numbers began, up more than 650,000 since the pandemic, and that's despite there being nearly 1 million vacancies in the economy. So we've got a workforce crisis, but this isn't like the 80s when it was an unemployment crisis, a jobs crisis. There are jobs, but there is a huge challenge in getting people into work. And I spent a few days in Middlesbrough with some colleagues of ours looking at this issue, talking to job centres, talking to people trying to get back into work. And I think we can take a look at the report.
It's a bit smoky in here.
Yes.
I need to stop smoking so much in here. I do.
Michael is unemployed and lives alone. He's just enough space for his hobbies.
Keeps you busy, you know what I mean? It's something to do. Between that, teaching myself a bit of Latin and whatever else, it just keeps me out of mischief.
But after 6 years out of work, he's stuck in a rut and says he wants a job.
People must think like, oh, it's all right to be on the dole and not have to do anything, but it's boring. You know your money and when it's going to run out.
Michael's first steps back towards the workplace have brought him to the council-led employment hub in Middlesbrough, a front line in a workforce crisis driven by long-term sickness and mental health.
Economically inactive for the last 4 weeks, and there's no chance of you going back to work in the next 2 weeks, is that right?
That's holding the economy back and pushing the welfare bill up.
They get used to that pot of money that's coming in, and it's very difficult with the cost of living crisis at the moment. Sometimes it is a bit of a vicious circle that they want to work full-time, but ultimately they'll be worse off with the benefits being taken off them.
It makes it feel like work doesn't pay.
You could say that, yeah, but it's that sense of achievement at the end of the week.
The balance between welfare and work is policed by job centres. If you're unemployed, you have to attend a weekly appointment, but those signed off sick don't have to look for work, a system that can be open to abuse.
We hear people talking about mental health and almost as if it's the new bad back, you know, it's an excuse. People get signed off and it's a way of playing the system. Would you recognise that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm saying yes, definitely. We have to be able to, you know, question, you know, and ask, because not only is it our job to support the public, we've also got to protect the public purse.
The solution to the workforce crisis is often said to be to get tough, to make the benefits regime less generous, sick notes harder to come by. But the evidence here in Middlesbrough is it is not as simple as that. The impact of poverty and ill health means many people need an enormous amount of support before they can even think about getting a job.
Fantastic. Michael says he wants to work, but he knows his ambition is fragile.
I feel like I want to get back into work or something, and if I maybe don't do that, especially if like only yourself to talk to, sometimes you can like, you go backwards, you lose the confidence.
For the next government, rebuilding the economy means repairing the workforce. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Middlesbrough.
So there are the jobs there. It's just that people don't want them, or...?
There's a mixture of things. There are jobs there that can't be filled, and that's the combination of Brexit and the pandemic. We're left with these vacancies. I mean, in the last 24 hours, I've been talking to people, can't hire traffic wardens, can't hire barbers, and it goes right the way up to advanced manufacturing where there aren't the skills there. So there's a problem right across the economy. The specific thing here, and particularly in Middlesbrough where we were, we're on every metric of worklessness, you might call it, whether it's how likely you are to be in a family that hasn't worked for 3 generations. No one has worked, where benefits is entrenched. That's a legacy of deindustrialisation, or sickness is higher. Of course, sickness and poverty go together. Poor health and poverty go together. And we know that NHS...
mental health as well.
Absolutely. Mental health now, the greater reporting, treating it with parity, that's been driving this rise in long-term sickness. And we're in this world where now you've got politicians saying they want to reform how you hand out the sick notes, and that's a whole generation that now is perhaps going to be confronted with being told what they're being encouraged to report as an illness shouldn't stop them going to work. It's a really knotty problem for whoever is in charge on July the 5th.
The Dems are suggesting free movement of people across Europe.
Indeed, and since that ended, funnily enough, this hole has got bigger. It's a very interesting conundrum.
Who'd have thought it, eh?
A real-time experiment.
Yes,
it's still playing out.
Not yet. Thanks very much indeed, Paul. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. With the Olympics just over a month away, joined in the studio by 2 legends of the game, Sir Steve Redgrave and Daley Thompson. Rishi Sunak says tax cuts are on the horizon as the Conservatives launch their election manifesto. We'll discuss what to expect with Katie and Ian.
There's a ghost in my house.
And have you ever been ghosted? Apparently pop star Billie Eilish has. We'll tell you more next.
Westminster may seem far from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer, live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
I'm thrilled to say, look who is with us. It makes me look really short, doesn't it? I know. All right. Steve Redgrave is here, and Daley Thompson. So, Steve Redgrave, and you wanted to get involved.
I did, of course.
Yeah.
Legends, absolutely.
Yeah. Olympics just around the corner. What are you most looking forward to?
Success for GB, I think.
Yeah.
But I think we've got a very good team across the board. We did well in most sports in Tokyo 3 years on. I think we've got another good games coming up.
What do you think?
Oh, yes. You know, the guys and girls, they never let us down. They always perform really well. And I'm just looking forward to the fact that Paris is only 50 or 60 miles away or whatever, and we can get to see it in the right time zone. And
He's
really
a good
enjoy
athlete.
it.
He's not very good at judging distances, though, is he?
But the margins now are so razor thin, aren't they? Think of things like rowing, things like cycling. Is it even harder than it was to be an Olympic champion, do you think?
I think it's always hard to get to the top because obviously each Games, especially in our sports that focus on the Olympics, is getting to that element each time. You've got to be faster and better than you were 4 years before. And whoever new athletes have come out have got to be faster and quicker. So it makes it harder, so the marginal gains become even more important. But the reality is you've got to be best in the world to take one of those medals when it comes around.
But you're here to tell us about how to try and stay as fit as you can going into a more mature life, more experienced life.
I've just been learning this from Steve, because obviously he's a lot older than I am.
Oh!
And we're doing stuff...
When did you retire?
Yeah, OK, thanks. Yeah, so we're talking about healthy ageing, because we're working with GSK, and we're talking about shingles. And Steve knows a little bit about it. I know absolutely nothing. I didn't realise that 1 in 4 people in the country get it. And as you get older, your immune system gets lower and you're susceptible to so many more injuries and illnesses.
What are your top tips?
The whole ageing process in some ways is that I've sort of been with Daley today, and we're very similar. It's sort of a routine of exercise, good healthy eating is all the sort of good processes. Is that of working with GSK? Obviously, that there's a great website of Get Shingles Ready. .co.uk, which is really important. There's a lot of information there. There's lots of different vaccines for all sorts of things. Is that get yourself checked out and see what's available and make some decisions on that.
When it comes to the exercise, though, what is good exercise? Because people don't need to go as far as you guys, but...
He's a gym bunny, you need to be aware
Is it going to the gym every day, 5 days a week, smashing it out in the gym, or is it just going for a simple walk?
For me, it's that whole range. You can either go for a walk every day, you can do a few sit-ups, you can go to the gym, or you can go absolutely crazy like clearly you don't.
So I knew that was coming, it's fine. I can leave this way, can I?
Yeah, I think for most people, particularly as you get a bit older, it's little and often.
Yeah. Sadly, Michael Mosley, who's left us, he always says, don't fall. That's the thing. As you get older, just don't fall. And he always talked about, I've said to you, didn't I, about standing on one foot when you're brushing your teeth, and it helps you balance.
Cool. I don't know if I could do that.
Should have done the whole interview.
With your eyes closed.
Yeah, no, I came.
You do brush your teeth, though.
I do brush my teeth, but and I was involved in a balancing sport, so putting those two together, coordination is not always our forte.
Yeah, but is it just going for a walk, or
It can be. I don't think it needs to be more than that. I really do think that if you get out for 20, 30, 40 minutes every day and get the fresh air, because it's not only the physical thing, it's the mental thing. And I think people do struggle, particularly as you get older. We were talking earlier, and we were just saying that even though we were really fit and stuff, these days, we struggle getting up from the ground, or sometimes if it's a really low seat and stuff. So if we are experiencing that, ordinary people must be, really struggling sometimes.
Keeping moving is the important thing. As soon as you stop of doing something regular, you stiffen up, and it's harder to keep that movement, to keep those joints moving. So walking is always pretty good. I play quite a lot of golf, quite badly, but that's the social side of that. So the mental health side of it is important. And I also do a reasonable amount of cycling. Don't get out on the roads quite so much. So during the winter is that a friend of mine that we get online. We've got statutory bikes in the back of our gyms, and so we sort of social media chatting to each other for the first half until we start getting out of breath. But it's that element of doing something with them. Daley's obviously got his own gym. When he goes there, that there's the process of mates that come
Social,
around,
yeah.
and the social side of it is really important. Mental health side
You're out
as
on the
well.
track still?
Oh, never. Never. But there's a vicious rumour that you used to be a bit of a track bunny.
I was a sprinter when I was a kid, a long time ago now.
So I could be encouraged to go out if you want to have a jog one day. Oh, right. Oh, God.
You won't dare say I'm not there. I'll be timekeeper.
What will you be?
I'll wave the flag.
OK,
Between the
that's
two of us, we'll mediate.
Exactly. So you're really looking forward to the Olympics?
I think it's going to be fantastic of relatively so close to us.
60 miles, I hear.
Yeah, no, but, of where you live from, even closer.
I think it might be 220 from London, isn't it?
I'm going to go with that over your 60.
OK.
It really is. Yeah, you were thinking about swimming the Channel.
At first, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Who are the ones to watch?
Within rowing, we've got a lot of opportunities. There's potentially 6 gold medals could come our way. If all of them come off, that would be pretty impressive. But the lightweight women's double are reigning world champions, haven't been beaten this season so far. So as much as you can put on a nail gold medal, they're at the top of the pile, but there are a lot of others' chances as well.
What about on the track?
Keely Hodgkinson in the 800. We've got Molly Cowdery in the pole vault, who's fantastic, and hopefully Katrina Johnson-Thompson will get back into shape.
So, yeah, and we're always really good at relays, aren't we?
Yeah, we always win a few things. We don't win as many as these guys,
Yeah.
but...
Just remind us how many you won?
Won 5. 5 in 5.
It's all right day's work, isn't it? Or a lifetime.
Quite good odds,
But following in his footsteps of watching him and getting his success that motivated me as well.
But going back to the point that you were making, sorry.
How many world records?
4 for me. Yeah.
Only 4.
Oh, thank you.
Only 4. But going back to the point that you wanted to make, as you get older, look after your health. Really important.
Definitely, it's so important. Keep mobile. Seek medical advice, doctors, of nurse at the GP practice. Get as much information as you can, and let's all have a healthy lifestyle well into our late stages.
I was going to say, particularly blokes, because and I'm definitely one. I never want to go to the doctor, no matter what's going on. I think if you feel that you ever need to, go and see them and at least take those fears away.
OK. Can you read this next link?
I can indeed.
OK, I'll race you to the gate. Go.
I'll stay racing that direction. Still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning. We're going to be looking at what we can expect from the Conservatives' election manifesto. We'll be discussing that with Katie and Ian.
I'm back, he won. What did you make of what we've heard from the politicians today?
Well, so far this morning, it's been a mixed bag. The Conservative Party really, really keen to drum up anticipation for their manifesto that they're launching very, very soon. It'll be live on Sky News. And we know we've heard some kind of, hints and leaks, and the Prime Minister's even been writing in the Telegraph this morning about capital gains tax and benefits for things like landlords and getting people on the housing ladder. So we've got lots of different policies that, both parties are flying out here. Labour really want to talk about health, they want to talk about children's health specifically. They know realistically that the NHS, when voters are polled, the NHS comes up again and again and again as one of the top 3 things they care about, whereas, interestingly, tax cuts is not in the top 3. So the Conservatives really not appealing to the masses, they are appealing to a particular core voter base, even though they say they are trying to implement, policies for young people and first-time buyers. Overall, the ticket is still very much old-fashioned conservatism, low tax, cutting tax, whereas actually Labour are looking at the polls and thinking, well, actually people care most about cost of living and the NHS and public services, so we're not going to promise tax cuts in the way the Tories are. They're trying to say that's irresponsible, fiscally irresponsible, and they're trying to say we're going to make the country work again.
OK. Let's see, 11:30 this morning is when we hear what is in the Conservative manifesto. Before that,
our top story this morning, which is the fact that the Conservatives will be launching, as we've just been saying, their manifesto later at the Silverstone racetrack. Rishi Sunak expected to promise a 2p cut in national insurance if he's re-elected. The Work and Pensions Secretary, tight-lipped, though, about the manifesto this morning, telling this programme that cutting people's tax will be at its heart. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet with Israeli officials today before arriving in Jordan for ceasefire talks. The United Nations Security Council yesterday voted to support a deal aimed at ending the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Foul play has been ruled out in the death of Michael Mosley, as CCTV footage appears to show him falling over close to where his body was found. Greek police have told Sky News there were no injuries on the TV doctor's body that could have caused his death. Germany is ramping up security ahead of the start of the European Championship this week. Police and security forces across the country have been training for a range of scenarios, from hooligans to terrorism and also cyber attacks.
Manifesto launch this week. Ian and Katie are here. We'll talk about that. Before we do, though, last Friday, my goodness me, suggestions that the only reason that the Prime Minister is still in post is because we're so close to an election. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your campaign's going pretty badly when you have ministers being sent out on the weekend to the media and they're being asked whether their leader, in this case Rishi Sunak, is going to step down or not. I mean, obviously his team dismisses as something they're not even thinking about, but it shows you, I think lots of people thought that the Tories were at such a low point when this election was called that you'll see things narrow. I think now the combination of the D-Day blunder, but I think probably actually as concerning, if not more, to Tory MPs is Nigel Farage's return. You put all these things together, add some more gaffes, and there is a sense that actually the people in the party are now worried that the gap is going to be wider than when the campaign started.
I mean, the gap is wide. It's not just that the polls haven't moved, it's that actually they're getting worse for the Conservatives. And we did have some indication of this before the election started, putting aside, policy and, 14 years in power, but just looking at how Rishi Sunak comes across, his presentational abilities when he's out there, when he does TV debates, when he goes on visits to schools. It's not so much about charisma as about human empathy with the people that he's talking about. He doesn't come across particularly well. So there was always that sense that he could be a liability on the campaign trail itself, and that is exactly what has proven to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen, various gaffes throughout. I think that you now have the point where it does feel as though, the usual figures to be quite supportive or optimistic, perhaps to the point that you think we're spinning them slightly, do seem a bit deflated where things are. I don't think we're seriously going to see a change of leader between now and polling day. But I think the risk is, if you don't see things such as the manifesto today land in the way they want, are you going to have more disunity in the Tory party and more Tory candidates speaking out with their own views? There's reports today that you could have, a rival manifesto, which again would just be completely confusing to voters, as if more infighting is going to help the situation. But it obviously points to the unhappiness, which all goes a bit back to the fact that Rishi Sunak opted for the summer election in the first place, which the majority of his party did not want.
I just can't get past the gaffe on D-Day. I just don't get it. I mean, just how damaging was it for him?
I mean, it's a disaster because it has cut through. It's easily comprehensible, it's colourful, it speaks to the heart rather than the mind. And it seems to sum up just this kind of intellectual and even moral befuddlement that he suffers under. So that spectacle at the end, there's a lot of stuff coming home to roost here. I mean, one part of that is this stuff that's brief, that's just like, well, they just thought that was just the French bit, so that doesn't really matter. And you sort of think, what an extraordinary thing to think. It's almost like I sometimes think that they've just misunderstood some of the emotional sentiment behind the Brexit vote. It was sort of interpreted as this, like, quite little England, OK, it's just an international stuff, it's of no consequence to anyone, we'll just come back here and do our stuff. Whereas the actual fact, when people then see an image of the American president and the French president, you're standing next to each other, and the Canadian president, exactly, the countries that are involved in that measure, with just David Cameron chucked in there, and even David Cameron being better than the original plan, which is to put Grant Shapps there. You just think, like, you just have no comprehension, no intuitive comprehension of people's sense of history and national pride. You've massively mangled in your mind the emotional inputs that led to Brexit and that swirl around that area. So, no, I mean, it does feel like the sort of almost the moral justice for a series of misjudgments that have been playing out over the last few years.
It was certainly, let's be kind, it was certainly an own goal. But as far as Labour is concerned, the latest polls are suggesting that people don't care particularly for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, and I think that's been the one thing, probably for the past year, as the polls have, not moved, that Tory MPs have clung to the sense there's not huge enthusiasm for Keir Starmer. I think that the issue for the Tories there is people do not care particularly for the Tory government to the point they're actually quite angry at the Tory government. And that means you could have this scenario, which right now looks like a reasonable scenario, quite likely, whereby you have a Labour supermajority, but not much enthusiasm for the Labour government, which is obviously going to raise lots of questions in terms of governing, how long they can keep support and so forth. But I think right now, with a more effective Tory message, with more Tory discipline, perhaps, with different things and fewer gaffes, things would look a bit tighter. I just think right now it doesn't feel as though it's too much of a problem that Keir Starmer does not have that enthusiasm behind him.
But it doesn't make for a buoyant ship going forward if we don't like who the Prime Minister is.
I don't know about...
You're going to say it's not about personalities, aren't you?
No, not quite. It's more about where you find yourself in the cycle. Like, his job, Keir Starmer's job, is to not scare the horses. That is the job. You've got a really unpopular government, you're 14 years in. All you've got to do is present yourself as unthreatening, and not just to people who might consider voting Labour, but also to imagine that you're a Lib Dem voter in the home counties, one of those Tory Lib Dem marginals. They feel authorised to vote Lib Dem, those wavering voters, because they think that the Labour proposition is not a particularly scary one. It's not very Corbyn-y, So on that basis, when your main job is just don't scare them, yeah, fine. The corollary of that is you're not particularly inspiring, because you're not putting out this great big positive message. You're basically trying to make sure that no one is particularly anxious about you. So that is the job here. I suspect, by the way, and I could easily be proved wrong on this, I suspect that the office of Prime Minister will suit Starmer quite a bit. The things that he prides himself on, competency, being on top of the details, being able to make the case and pursue the plan, all of the stuff that looks quite uninspiring in opposition will actually suit him and offer him a little bit of gravitas, in Downing Street itself. And this dynamic might change slightly.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I think potentially. I mean, I do think it's going to potentially store up problems for a Labour government that it seems less about enthusiasm for them and more the sense of a time for change because people want the Tories out, as opposed to necessarily linking that to what comes after. There's obviously some people who really want a Labour government, but I think you look back to the ITV debate last week, and obviously there were different polls, but that initial Snap YouGov poll had Rishi Sunak 2 points in front. I think when you look at any polling in terms of where the Tories are compared to Labour, you would expect Keir Starmer to be a bit further ahead in terms of, as a leader. So I think that does point to some of these problems.
OK, fascinating stuff. That was 8 minutes gone. Amazing. Thank you. Will we see you same time next week? I sincerely hope so. Thank you, team. Thanks very much. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. We catch up with Matt Smith and the other stars of Sky Atlantic's House of the Dragon at the premiere for the second series. I particularly like the story about you having to convince David Bowie to take part in the Glastonbury Festival. You'd sort of set that up.
Yeah, that was funny. David wasn't that keen on doing big festivals at that time, and he was doing his own sort of quiet shows, enjoying life, just got married to Iman, everything was fine. And Glastonbury weren't super keen on him. They were worried he was going to do something very obscure, left field, like Tin Machine or whatever. And the promoter, John Giddings, said to me, look, let's get him to do it. And so I leaked a story to the Sunday Times. And my idea was that it would be in one of the columns there. Wouldn't it be a great idea if Bowie played Glastonbury? Unbeknown to me, it ended up on the front page. Bowie headlines Glastonbury. Newspapers went, the phones went crazy. They sold out all the tickets in a couple of hours. Glastonbury had a complete meltdown. And then the phone went quiet for 3 days, and I never heard a word from David. And I thought, oh my God, he must be furious. He didn't want to play a festival, and he's booked in the biggest festival in the world. And after about 3 days, I got this message. Julian, who worked with me, it said, you naughty boys, don't ever do that again. But it was great, David said. And of course, it turned out to be the biggest one ever. I think the walls came down, they had 120,000 people, and it went down in legend. And it changed the sort of trajectory of David's career. I loved working with the Spice Girls. They were so much fun and hilarious and great individuals, all of them. When I first got hired by them, my feet didn't touch the ground for a few days. I was flown out to Rome, and in fact, this is the thing, I had to go down. They were doing a little show there, and I got a call from my lawyer at the time, a guy called Alexis. He said, I've just seen you. Why are you going down the Via Garibaldi in Rome? I said, well, how do you know I'm there? He said, I'm watching Sky News, and they're actually plotting your course on the way from the airport to the hotel. And at that point, I realised how big the news was. The next day, we flew to Paris in a private jet to go shopping, as you do. Then we went to a disco in Madrid or something. And I remember then I finally sat down with the girls. And I remember talking to Victoria, and she was so funny. And I remember thinking, you've been misnamed. Forget Posh Spice, you're Witty Spice. And at that point, in all seriousness, I thought they're such smart individuals. Let's bring out the media and the newspapers, and everyone can handle this individually. You don't need to be protected as a group, and so it came to be.
Let's talk about AI and as it relates to Apple.
Well, good morning, Kay. That's right. So AI is now going to be integrated into our iPhones. So theoretically, it's going to be easier to use with a more personal feel. And what will happen is that the phones will basically learn from what we put in. So for those who aren't really familiar with what AI is, it's basically machine learning. So what we put into the phone will learn from, and it will start to prompt and generate its own responses as well. So platforms like ChatGPT might be incorporated into the phone. I actually used it to plan a holiday. So you can put in flight times, you can put in how long you're staying, and it will come up with a whole itinerary. So it can do lots of things like that. But some people are not very happy, including
Elon Musk, the CEO and owner of Tesla and X, he's said he's very concerned about security and data for people that are using phones within his company. And he has said that actually visitors to his company will have to store their devices in Faraday cages, he said on X this morning. But Apple has been very keen to stress that the security will be very high and no data will be put at risk. But it's really that this seems to be the future. We've had companies like Microsoft integrating this into their system, so Apple is really following suit to try to keep up with that.
When?
We don't know yet. It's set to come in.
To get a new phone?
No, it should just be on your phone as normal. It's not quite clear when it will come in or how it will come in.
Maybe it's already here.
Who knows? Spooky for first thing in the morning.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Stars of Sky Atlantic's House of the Dragon. Are you a fan?
I've never seen it, Kay, but I'm going to say yes.
OK,
I'll say yes.
well, you've missed season 1, but season 2, green carpet, here we go.
The Targaryen who sits the Iron Throne is not just a king or a queen. They are a protector of the realm. Now I find myself in an impossible position.
All hail King Aegon!
The enemy usurped my throne.
We're going to King's Landing.
Katie went. How was it?
What are we going to do about it?
What? These shows are some of the biggest on TV. High drama, big stunts, action and what have you. The premiere, equally matching in terms of the drama that we got there. There were hailstones in Leicester Square that broke our camera and took out our live signal for doing that. Anywhere else in the country got hailstones yesterday evening. It was actually completely... I nearly didn't take a coat. Anyway, this isn't to do with House of the Dragons, is it? 2 years since it's last been on our screen. It returns, and it's even bigger and better. And if the first season was all about sort of scene setting and perhaps a bit slower in pace, boy, does this season return bigger and better.
How can it be even bigger? How? Because the last season was huge.
Well, it ended huge, didn't it? But it was a little bit slow building up to the epic end. But this season is all about the Dance of the Dragons, which is the big... It sounds so nerdy. I feel like you're looking at me thinking I'm a right nerd, Kay. It's about the Dance of the Dragons, which is this sort of civil war within the Seven Kingdoms. But the difference between Game of Thrones and this is it's all about dragons. So you've got air battles with dragons. So it's so impressive. You're not convinced.
Matt Smith's character when he commanded the dragon was super cool.
Civil war within the Seven Kingdoms.
Yes. So, Kay, you're getting up at 2 in the morning this Sunday, are you? Sunday into Monday, so that you can see the episodes, as fans do.
I mean, I'm a big fan, but I did find the first season a bit boring, so I am hoping there's a bit more energy in the next one.
But it got good towards the end,
I liked it. It really picked up.
Yeah, but it took a while, didn't it?
It did the opposite of Last of Us, which just got quieter and quieter and quieter, more boring.
No! Controversial, that one.
This got better and better as well.
Should we look at some of the stars that we spoke to last night? Matt Smith, of course, he's a very complex character that he plays, one of the kings, Daemon Targaryen, blonde wig and looking fine with his blonde looks. But it is a real sort of schemer in this, and I spoke to him at the premiere last night.
I think that's where he really thrives and sort of, I want to say enjoys himself, but that's where he's most awakened, It's where, and it isn't really about the pursuit of power. I think it is genuinely about the pursuit of chaos for Daemon Targaryen.
It's Doctor Who. I know, and he's joined an equally big show now. He's an actor that clearly likes commitment from his TV shows.
Are there others that I know?
Well, Freddie Fox, who wasn't in the last season, who we don't know what his character is until we get into season 2. I'm just looking at you now because you know what I'm talking about. But Freddie Fox, of course, peroxide blonde in real life, so you would assume he's going to be a Targaryen. No.
Okay.
A Targaryen, Kay.
All the people with the white hair are called Targaryens.
So Matt
They're
Smith,
involved in the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's a bloodline.
Of the Six Nations.
With the dragons.
7 kingdoms.
7 kingdoms.
Yeah.
The dragons.
Yes.
OK.
But Freddie Fox is
blonde
joining...
hair.
Blonde hair. Freddie Fox, who has blonde hair in real life, doesn't, in the character he's playing, we spoke to him and got some clues as to who he's going to be playing.
OK.
I can tell you that I'm the son of Otto Hightower, played by the brilliant Rhys Ifans, and the brother of Alison, played by the incredible Olivia Cook. So he comes into the story at a moment of high tension as the battle lines begin to be drawn, and is finding his feet in very difficult circumstances.
We were talking about this yesterday, actually, and I like Judge Judy. Have you ever seen Judge Judy?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, horses for courses, dragons for wagons. Oh, where did that come from?
I don't know. Is it time to end the show?
Tell me about the weather again. We've got some pictures.
Oh, yes, the weather. It was just ridiculous. We got hailstones in the middle of Leicester Square. This was me filming.
This is what
and
Paul
a
Kelso
flood.
was talking about.
A flood. Everyone had to go... The green carpet became just sodden with these hailstones, and everyone in their lovely glamorous dresses were just getting absolutely wet. And
Billie Eilish. Let's talk quickly about Billie Eilish, should we? She's been ghosted. Did you know that?
Oh, I did. I read. Oh no, it was on a podcast, wasn't it? She revealed this. I mean, who? Maybe people are just intimidated by how brilliant she is. I wouldn't ghost Billie Eilish. Come on.